1 minute. Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's workshop, July 14th, 2026. The time is 11:30. I hope everyone had a nice, relaxing week and a wonderful 4th of July celebration. We are starting today with the mental health plan. Mr. Connor, if you'd like to introduce Dr. Brandon Johnson and the item before us.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Board. Yes, today we are going to be looking at a few items that we normally take a look at this time of year. The first is our annual approval for our mental health allocation plan, and Dr. Johnson is going to be sharing a little bit about what's in that, and then we're going to move to an ongoing discussion, which we started at the last board meeting. At the end, we talked about some revenue generation ideas and things that we need to discuss related to the 26-27 school year as we continue to move forward with our financial condition where we're at, and some ways that revenue could help offset some of the expenditures that are pressing our budget continuously. And then we're going to look at PM3 results. So the state released those in the last few weeks, and we do now have the results of state assessments as well as our school grade and district grade. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we got to those results and what those results were, and celebrate some outstanding achievements here for our students, our staff, and our community. So I'm going to start with Dr. Johnson, who will discuss the mental health allocation plan.
All right, good morning, Mr. Connor, board chair, as well as the board, and Patrick. How you guys doing? And welcome back. If you could put the slides on for me, sir. There we go. So I am here to talk about the mental health assistance allocation plan for our upcoming school year. Really, the presentation outcomes, we'll go over the purpose and requirements, and also some of the program staffing and partnerships that we've actually done this year, and in showing what we're going to do the upcoming year. As you take a look, you'll notice that this is, as Mr. Connor already explained, this is an annual piece that we do every single year that will also come up on the board later. This does help us supplement some of the additional resources we need to ensure that students are getting the best service as it pertains to mental health. We do follow the MTSS framework, so in the next couple of slides, you will see our Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3 support that we provide to students. And then truly last but not least is our connection with community partners as well as families and children to make sure they're also getting support off campus, not just on campus. So as you take a look, you probably have seen this before because it does mirror what we do in academics. Our Tier 1, really our universal prevention. Our Tier 2, which is our targeted evidence support. And then really our Tier 3 is that intensive individualized support. In the next few slides, I'll break down each one so you know what it entails for each tier. Really for Tier 1, want to celebrate our PBIS. We do a wonderful job at our schools. You guys know when we kind of parade them in, a very long line that also stands outside as we talk about the work that's been done with PBIS, really within that Tier 1 to ensure all students get what they need. We clearly do follow the resiliency standards. That is an expectation at every single school, including the required instruction. And then also, last but not least, that district-wide staff training that is imperative them to also understand what are the resiliency standards. Tier 1 support, truly important. But then when we start looking at mental health, we start talking about Tier 2 support. What does that look like on campus, and what does it look like for students? Really, for us, it's building resiliency in students. Let's be very honest. That check and connect that you see is hopefully to ensure that every child has an adult that they can trust and speak to when they are struggling. Someone that when they show up to campus, off the bus, whatever it happens to be, someone that they can connect with and really share and get through whatever it is they need to get through. The second piece you'll see, the motivational interviewing, that is to empower students to be able to have conversations with one another. It's amazing sometimes we forget you do still need to practice, and we do still need to train students. How do you interact with each other? And the last piece, that skill streaming, that's building skills within students to ensure their well-being as they move throughout their career in our K through 12 education, or let me say this, pre-K through 12. Thank you, Dr. Hutchinson. And for our Tier 3 intensive supports, This is when we see students, unfortunately, that after we tried Tier 1 resiliency standards, that Tier 2 within groups, they need that individualized support. So yes, the cognitive behavioral therapy tools are to build those skills in them, but really the FBA and the BIPs, or the functional behavior assessment and the behavior intervention plans, are those individualized pieces that we can now identify what are the skills that they're lacking that we need to teach to ensure that they can be successful in school. Because at the end of the day, that is the most important thing for us. And then last but not least, that care team, referral, and interagency partners. The reality is, yes, we can support on campus, but we all know there are things that also need to happen off campus. And those referrals are incredibly important to ensure that parents are equipped to be able to support their own kids as well. Now, there's early identification and safety. These are the pieces that we have in place to ensure that our schools are safe. So yes, the threat management and suicide risk prevention, always incredibly important. Our timely school and community-based services, that's to ensure that we do have those partnerships with the community as well. And then the counseling functional assessment for high-risk student. That is what we look at, what we follow through when we do feel like maybe there's something else that needs to be done with the individual student. And then, of course, the impact on the student mental health. Why is this plan important? It allows us, as you look at that first one, to give a better ratio for support on campuses. That is why we have these additional funds. Yes, the strategic plan to ensure that students get what they need, also incredibly important. We can do that even without sometimes funding, ensuring that students are always getting what they need. But the mental health response and resiliency teams are also a part of this plan as well. Now, our community partners, as you have seen them come through for our interagency agreements, we are now up to 30 plus, which is incredibly important. It ensures that there isn't a lapse between when we identify a need and when students need support off campus. Second piece, that on campus with community and faith-based, also incredibly important, or family-based services, to ensure that, yes, outside of what we can get done, we also have someone to be able to support that as well. Expanded access, that's beyond school walls. Remember, we would love to say that things only happen on school campuses as it pertains to mental health. We all know that's not accurate. We have to ensure that things are being supported outside of school campuses, and that parent and family engagement, everything that we do, permission from parents. Now, our accountability and monitoring. We do use documentation and focus in our SIS system. Please understand that includes tracking our interventions and also parent permission, so that people can follow up. Even if a student were to move to another school, we now have this documentation so that we can continue to support that particular child. You'll see the outcome monitoring and fidelity checks. That's not only at the school-based level, that's also at our level, district supported, to be able to ensure that what we say is happening is actually happening. And then last, we do report everything to the state. Hence also this yearly piece, like Mr. Connor said, that we need to make sure that we present to you, the board as well. Now, in our critical insights from the 25-26 school year. Now, if you take a look, really, depending on the screen, on the left side of the screen, the 24-25, you'll see this is the Baker Act overview from year to year. You will see a slight decrease in the year, but I also want you to take a look at the students that are impacted, kind of in that parentheses. So it gives you kind of that true picture of how that process works. As far as off-campus referrals, pretty much the same, which to me is a positive, showing that parents are aware of what resources that we have in the community, and then also the community-based pieces that we do now, still continuing to push forward within 24, 25, 26, and we will continue that 26, 27 school year. Now, I'll break it down a little bit more so that it's a little bit more clear for everyone. The referrals, of course, you'll see the numbers, but the successful connection of sitting at around 80%, that also you have to remind yourself, yes, we can refer, but parents do still have to follow up and ensure that they want that particular resource or that they follow through. We still do that on our end, but that is still a choice of the parent if they do want to continue with that resource. You'll see right now we do have 299 completed. We still have some that are still continuing as of right now, and then we have 4 scheduled. Because even though it's still the summer, it's not mean that we don't ensure that students get what they need. Now, why may be the case that we're not at 100%? We wanted to put this slide in here to kind of give you a true understanding that there are times where there is a non-response from parents, even though we are constantly calling and following up. Some of that is a choice on their part. And then family relocation. We do have times where people move, but remember something, the file does follow the child. And so there is a follow-up process when they get that to review that CUME folder to ensure if there's something needed for that particular individual that is followed up as well. Remember, they can also call the prior school district to also get that information. Okay. Within that, the 222 referrals declined. These were the reasons for that. Some of it was existing services that were already in place. Others were that parents did prefer their own referral service. And then for some, this is the case, is perceived of need. And I always say that, but at this time, because remember, we will continually follow up. If something else happens within our school campus or off campus, we're going to follow back up with that parent to say, hey, at this time, do we have a better understanding that maybe this is the next service that your child does need? At the end of the day, it's still that parent's right. But as a school, and you'll see that last one incredibly important, we will always continue to support students when they're on this campus. Now, for that year-over-year comparison, as you look at the referrals made and then the unique students, it does let you know that we do have students, unfortunately, sometimes that are referred more than one time, just like I talked about before, because if something else does happen, we want to ensure that we're not just backing off because a parent said no the first time. It is our goal and job to make sure students get what they need. You'll see, though, that we went from 73% to 80% this last year. Was that the case? I believe it's knowledge. Parents truly understanding what are the resources that we have and how we can support their students. To me, that shows that they're following through on their end, and then we're constantly following back up with parents as well. Now, for our lockout data summary, this is always a question like, what exactly does this mean? Unfortunately, we do have times where students at home are having really severe behavior needs, and parents need additional support from that child outside of that home. And so when that is the case, they're actually referred to community service. Now, we do partner with the case managers to ensure that we follow up, especially as it pertains to them still coming to school, because we don't want them to lose out on that. But that is a place where parents actually do have, they're essentially giving up their child for that particular time within the community. And then we work through their actual case manager to ensure students still get what they need on our campus. That can be even the mental health pieces, but also the educational pieces as well. Right now, and you'll see, we do not have any active pending cases. Now, to get over our overview for this upcoming, remember this is anticipated. We are anticipating about $2.87 million from the FEIP for our funding. You will see a difference in the total right at the top that shows 379. That is because of roll forward dollars as of this time, as we have accumulated over time. Why is that important? Because it does allow us, as you see within the first personnel, to still support homeschool liaisons and school psychologists. Incredibly important to make sure that we have them on our campuses. You also notice that, and you've heard this probably countless times about teen court, that we do utilize as one of our resources. Professional learning, another piece of the funding, and then our charter school allocation that I'll speak to in the next slide in a minute about how that's broken down. And then any unpaid balance that's left over, we then would roll forward that as well. Now, for charter schools, as we do not have any that opt in, which means they do take their funding source, the proportionate share that they have, to provide their own mental health services on their campus. Now, with that, we do review the process. They have to submit their plan to us. We review that to approve, and then we follow up with our accountability measures as well. So there is still a process. We are part of this, but they do allow for them to have their own funding so that they can provide their own mental health services, whether that be psychologists or whatever they feel is in the need of their particular campus. And then for us, as next steps, when we do get the final version of this, final allocation, we'll make sure we revise anything that needs to be done just based on allocations if we need to make adjustments. And then, of course, it'll be coming, because of the time of us off, it'll be coming to the board in the next board agenda item coming up later on within this month. As always, every student, every day, Mr. Connor, but for us, supporting this belonging and success, sir. I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. And board, you were provided the mental health allocation assistance plan in its entirety for your review, so hopefully you've had a chance. And if you have any questions related to that or the budget, we'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Robinelli, Mrs. Maroney.
I haven't been called that a long time. That's when I was at Southside. That's some of the kids called me that. I have a question. What are the counselor ratios, elementary, middle, and high?
Yeah, go please.
If I may, Ms. Marinelli. So at elementary, all of our schools begin with one counselor regardless of enrollment. They receive a second school counselor at 750 students at elementary. At middle school, we begin with one counselor for every middle school. Then we add a second counselor at 700 students at the middle school level. And then for our high schools, we do aim for, and our combination schools, a average of about 450 students per counselor at our high school levels. I will say for our K through 8 schools, pre-K through 8 schools, we do follow the middle school ratio as well. So that's a 1 to 700.
Thank you. And I think that's important for the community and everyone to know that with those kind of ratios, the counselors can only do so much. And I think it's important to know what the school's responsibility is, and then when you have to turn it for outside counseling. Because I know at the elementary, the expectations are between 504 plans, if they do classroom guidance, the groups, the individuals, and all the other things. I think it's going to be very important that it's not the board's responsibility, but I have talked to Superintendent Connor about extra responsibilities that are put on. If we're really focusing on this mental health piece and have our counselors do what they need to do with these kind of ratios, it's going to be important that they're not given a lot of other kind of duties that other staff members aren't. So I'm advocating for that. Now, whether that happens, that's not my decision. I do think it's very important that we're very much aware of what the expectations are for our counselors, especially at the elementary level where a lot of these problems really start to surface. Because if we're truly here to help kids in their mental health, we need to give as much support as we can with the resources that we have. So and I'm glad to hear that we have 30 plus agencies that we're working with, because as much as we can have families work with the school outside and keep the communication open, that only helps the student. And it also helps the teacher to be able to know what is a trigger and what's not. And so thank you for all of this. I just wish we had the resources to have the ratios be a lot lower than that, because 750 to 1 is quite a task. Well, they get 2 if you hit 750. So if you're 749, you still got 1.
We keep a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah, I know how that works.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Barker.
Thank you. Obviously, this is near and dear to me, so thank you for taking the time to really go over it with us. I'm excited about what next year looks like for our kids. I'm wondering if, for the benefit of the community and anyone watching, if you could share a little bit more about our CARES team and what that looks like when we have a student who needs some significant assistance. I think what people sometimes I hear is, they'll just give me a phone number for another agency and then I have to go follow through. But that's not completely, I think, what's happening. So can you share a little bit more?
Yes, I can, ma'am. No, unfortunately, I would hope that that's not how people perceive it, but if we can clarify today, that would be nice. Within that CARES team, first and foremost, we may get a referral based on teachers seeing something that's going on, or even a parent. Right after that, it is our job, I hope everyone understands, to follow up. And really, that is calling a team together that knows that child along with that teacher to see what are the next supports within that process that we can provide. Yes, it can be, of course, with parent permission on campus, things that we can do. But yes, you're right. Part of that process is following up off campus as well. You just kind of heard Mrs. Marinelli refer to is that we want to make sure that anything we can do on campus, that's including a check-in, check-out process, or if you're seeing the counselor, or if you need to see the school psychologist. But the other side of that is ensuring that, yes, within our community partners, that we do give parents the opportunity to connect with that as well. Now, it is still our job, I feel like, to continuously follow up, help parents make that connection, follow up if they have not been able to connect with that community partner as well. And then, of course, following along and documenting when that has happened or hasn't happened. So no, there isn't a time, Mrs. Barker, where we just let someone go about their ways when we know that there really is a struggle happening. You're talking about an individual student that normally also will have the conversation about either a BIP or FBA. Mm-hmm. So there are layers to that to ensure those pieces.
And so really what students experience is more of a warm handoff, it sounds like, and a continuing presence by school staff and working with whoever is the outside agency. Would you say that's a fair?
That's correct.
Okay, great. I'm so glad to hear that. And who is on that CARES team?
Yeah. You want to jump into Kurt? Yeah, please.
So it actually really becomes a combination, to your point, Mrs. Barker, about our school-based staff, our district-based staff, and then our community partners, and how do we help support families through that process. So when we look at that, we are integrating our school psychologist, our social worker, our homeschool liaisons, if we have them. If we think back to last year, and kudos to the team, we kind of restructured a little bit by having our MHeart kind of team of school psychologists that were internal. We had a lot of conversation about what that would look like. And so by being able to develop that team, we were able to implement really a systematic approach to monitoring the connection between our students and families with those outside providers when we had situations that necessitated therapeutic care. And that is really the differential there between the type of services that are provided at a school-based, that's school-based counseling, that's kind of friendship, how do we get along with others? If I'm upset, how might I express that in a school environment versus more therapeutic care, which is what our partners out in our community who do a wonderful job with helping to support our families there. So we do monitor that all the way through. We do have some state statutes in terms of timelines that we follow. And so usually our MHeart team member who is assigned to that particular school is solely responsible for that handoff and making sure that we have that connection. So if we know that we've received a referral and let's say within 30 days, we haven't heard from the community agency, that person's responsibility is to help make sure we get that connection to that family so that we are not just having a family trying to navigate through really an unknown situation by themselves, but we have folks who have experienced this over a course of multiple times to be able to help overcome any of those barriers and making those connections for them.
And do we feel like forming the internal MHeart team has been successful in reaching more students than we had in the past?
Absolutely. And I think if you look at one of the slides that Dr. Johnson had shared, you'll see that not only did the percentage of connections increase by having our internal MHeart team, also the number of students that we were able to provide those services to increased as well.
Very good. That's what I was hoping you would say. My last question, and I know we spoke about this one-on-one, but I think for the benefit of the group, I feel a little concerned about the rollover funds, the about $1 million that we are using to keep our personnel at the level they need to be at, because next year then are we back in this situation where we're using one-time funds to cover positions that we really do need long-term, and what is the plan to be able to keep those folks on board when we don't have those rollover funds next year?
So that is a part of our long-term and short-term budgeting. So everything has an off-ramp, and roll forward is used for that. We wanted to create the MHeart team. We are not always sure what allocation is going to come through the mental health or what needs are going to be presented within our data or district staffing allocations. So yes, we realize that those folks are on roll forward, but as we're planning, and we'll get to that once we land this budget and present that to you in the fall, but when we're doing planning all through the spring, it's looking at anything that's on soft dollars that's remaining, which is a very few, to your point, this area, and how do we integrate that into the funding that we do have to sustain what is working. And that's a process we do all the time with any competitive grants, federal dollars, like the mental health grant. We talk about Title II, we talk about Title III and Title IV. So it's a constant movement and budgeting game, but that's how you use your dollars strategically. It changes every year. And you have to focus on what works and off-ramp things that don't, but you can't do it all at one time. So we will continue to look at that and sustain what's most important based on the outcomes. And some of this data is already showing that it's promising. We need to prioritize it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'd like us to just keep that kind of in our minds as we continue this discussion. But thank you all. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you. So my questions are not about can you do a better job, because I think what I most recently heard in the last exchange is that you guys are still struggling, that there's not enough dollars, and you're trying to figure out, how do I have the highest impact with the most amount of students with the dollars we have? So my questions are going to be based on ultimately going to how do we ask for more money based on data that is in our legislative agenda. I want to try and get as specific as we can when we go to do the legislative agenda. And so I want to make sure that you all don't feel that my questions are putting you on the defensive, because you do an amazing job. And also, I need to apologize. I just caught myself on camera. My sport jacket is hanging beautifully on the back of the dining room chair. So I just wanted to make sure that I was very clear that I'm trying to drive into more specific data that we can drive into with the legislative agenda. So I know that I want to sort of, my first question is, have you done actual data that says our mental health support, whether it's in-house or at an outside agency, or if it's one-on-one or group, but the overall amount of students, this percentage falls into Title I? Have you ever done that overlay?
Yes, we have, and we can provide that. We can break that down by school for you.
Okay, so that to me is an important, another place where I'm going to be driving very, very hard, because I feel so good about our recent data, the recent performance data that shows that you guys on your second and third year are beginning to get out of the park, and I know it's going to continue. But now, from my seat, I really want to focus now, what else can we be doing in this lowest quartile to enhance it? And I'm not saying you haven't been doing that. I'm just saying that I'm going to be asking more questions specifically in that area. So that is going to be important data for me, that when we start doing these conversations in the future, that this is where it affects. Because at the end of the day, we have to make those strides. And you guys are, again, I look at that, and you are making those strides, but it's been my comparison that it's often because of poverty or for whatever the reasons are that kids are experiencing mental health issues and behavioral issues. And so that's part of it. The other side of this is, and I know Dr. O'Day and I have had these conversations too, is can we provide more professional development to the teachers? Because when they struggle with behavior, it's not, we don't want it to pass it on inappropriately, but we also need to support them when it is a behavioral issue and a mental health issue. So is that another area that we need to explore?
So good news. We have a very great philanthropic community, and we've been heavily supported by the Barancic Foundation, the Community Foundation, as it pertains to empowering educators and advancing their skills year after year. We just submitted our third grant with them, and it's focused on continuing to sustain the professional development system that we've put in place. And we've done some different carve-outs this year pertaining to data and needs, and we have significant amount of funds allocated to our population of teachers that works with our students with disabilities, specifically those in specialized program, because the needs are so great, as well as designating funds to ensure that our tier 1 expectations as far as mindset and de-escalation strategies are strongly in place for teachers, and then any other additional behavior supports that may be needed by school, we've allocated funds. And when we start the year with, a tier 1 approach, as Dr. Green and Ms. Manelli go in schools and work, and also now Dr. Johnson in student services, if they're seeing issues and data showing a need in one place versus another, and we already have preliminary trends where we say statistically, based on the demographic of student, and if there are outliers there, we're already planning for intervention support because we have that preliminary data already. The only reason we're not sharing it today is because our data came out just before break. We have to clean it up and make sure that those are accurate numbers we're sharing, because it is data we triangulate. It does go into the support plans, which you're going to hear a little bit from Dr. Green and Ms. Minelli, how they triangulate the data to meet the needs of students. But then additionally, I do want to let you know, we do have plans, Mr. Connor is working on it currently, that we're going to be presenting behavior and attendance data, socioeconomic status, and how that correlates to performance. We've been compiling that by all 4 quartiles of students as a district and by every school. It's just not the right place within the PM3 to explain, because it would be too much. So that is upcoming in the next 2 to 3 board work sessions, where we can really take a deep dive into what the data says, but then how does our system line to addressing those gaps?
So I just want to be ready for the legislative agenda, because I mean, I know what the dollar amount was that was allocated from the state when we were an $800 million budget. Now that it's 1.2, it's not that much better. And we really have a mental health crisis because of social media, because of the smartphones. That's all been documented and correlated, but we still have this lower quartile that, in my guess, and still has higher ramifications that we need to specifically address with the legislature and talk about. If you want improvement in data, this is the kind of investment that we need in order for every student every day. And that's where I'm sort of heading. My other question is, when parents refuse and or they're not contactable, is it lowest? Does it have a higher percentage in the bottom quartile? And again, if you can't answer, it's a question that I would like to see. Okay, and then when we refer to those 30 outside agencies, is there a cost factor to the family?
All of our agreements with any of our outside agencies, they have to agree to serve that student regardless of a family's ability to pay. So if families do have insurance or are eligible for Medicaid, they would work with insurance or Medicaid to receive a reimbursement. But that does not stop any of the services being provided once our agency partners have agreed to work with them. They will receive that regardless of a family's ability to pay.
Okay. And is that thoroughly explored? And I understand, I mean, there's only so much capacity that we have, right? But is that thoroughly explored either through the provider or through us in some way to make sure that it's not refused because of dollars?
Yes, when we make our connection through from our families to our outside providers, there is a clear understanding that they cannot refuse to serve that family if that family is unable to pay for the service.
Okay. And
It's
then
part of our agreement, Mr. Edwards, that they have to sign off on.
well, I kind of know all this,
Yeah.
but I want to keep making sure that for those that are paying attention, especially around the topic around mental illness or mental health, mental wellness. I'll even go one step further, mental wellness, that for those that are paying attention, I want to make sure that I'm driving at this correctly. I loved that you said, and it was important, and I hope it didn't get missed by the public, you said that our students, even though the parents may refuse, you still provide support. Could you tell us what that looks like or sounds like?
Absolutely. So if we do have a family who, for whatever reason, chooses not to engage that student in therapeutic services with an outside agent, we do provide school-based supports for them. And so they may meet with our school counselor, with our school psychologists, some of our school social workers are licensed clinical social workers as well. They have their LCSWs that can provide things such as CARS, counseling as related service through either IEPs or 504s. And so we still do work to provide supports. They are more educationally relevant than therapeutic in nature because they are, we aren't in the therapeutic.
Got it.
Kind of aspect, but we do still work to support them so that they can be as successful as possible.
Can the parents refuse that?
So there are parts that we do need parent permission for. There are other parts that are built into our required instruction. And so when we look at, say, our resiliency standards that we do teach that are part of the curriculum and our standards of, within the state, those are part of their regular instruction. So students have to participate in those pieces. But if we were to, for example, let's say a student has a 504 that has counseling or related services, we would require parent permission for that, just as we would for a student who needed a 504 for something that didn't apply to counseling. They needed some other type of accommodation. That would be, we still would need parent permission for that.
Okay, so again, I'm running down a road here. So when that happens, and the parents refuse, does that continue to present a behavioral problem for the teacher who is doing their very best to accommodate and not to pass off a problem? Does that still present a problem in the classroom?
Yes.
Okay.
The problem will not go away without the right intervention and support over time, so it does present a problem.
Okay. Then, again, I'm still going here. How do we support the teacher, and how do we support the students in the classroom who are experiencing the same disruption? And how do we reach the parents? Where do we go with that is my question. What do we do? And then how does that affect the students' performance? And do we isolate that performance so that you get where I'm going? Because if we're doing everything that we're supposed to be doing and we're not getting cooperation, now what?
Well, they still stay with us.
I
even
understand
though-
that, and well, they should.
Yep,
I'm
there are
not
other
suggesting
entities
they go
that may
somewhere else.
not be the case, but
Yeah.
there are tier 2 and tier 3 behavior plans that are very, very intense, that are handled by school-based staff in partnership with the teacher. The teacher has a part in that, and there's also push and support. And it can get down to at 10 a.m. before writing class, Rachel O'Day, that's just not what she wants to do. So we push in some support around 10 a.m. to mitigate the extreme outbursts that could occur. And we try to bring it from a red, to an orange, to a yellow, and we will continuously actively work on that. The Swiss Care team meets weekly. The behavior teams push in from the district when that happens. We've had issues in certain areas with cluster sites where we've just flooded support to get things in a manageable place so that the school can then reconvene normal operations and continue to support whatever plan we have put over the top. So we have a lot we can do between district staff and school staff. If that extreme need does present, we tag team that process and we sustain it as long as possible because they're with us. And it's hard, and it's definitely because it causes disruption for the whole class, for the teacher. All of us that have been in education, there are years when you have certain things in certain classes that you remember for a reason, but it should never be where people don't feel supported and that everyone has all hands on deck to support students to get there alongside the teacher. But it'll just be a sustained challenge with support. That should not be an independent experience by anyone that's leading that classroom.
So the last thing that I want to say in that line of question, again, I didn't want to put anyone on the defensive, but what I really know is that scenario happens, you use the word extreme, from moderate to extreme happens a heck of a lot more than the public realizes. That disrupts our classrooms, that makes a challenge for teachers and a challenge for our students. And that is why we need more money and why we need more support mechanisms coming into our schools for just the type of scenarios that I'm talking about that only reach from moderate to your word, extreme. So that's really where I'm headed. And then how does that overlay into the lowest quartile is also where I'm headed. So heads up. Last question, I promise. You oversee charter schools' applications in this, in their mental health reports. How do you rate those? How do you rate those? I mean, you pass them, but I need to know how you rate them. Are they excellent? Are they exceeding the standard, or are they just okay?
Well, we still go by whatever the state legislature tells us that has to be approved. So as long
I get that.
yeah,
but how
so
do you rate that?
I rate it to make sure that they do have something in the process of either school psychologist, social worker, or counselor that can provide that support to students. That really is where that line is, Mr. Edwards. As long as they have that in place, technically speaking, they are meeting that requirement.
Okay, and do you overlay, well, I guess you have to just follow the state. So I think I got my point across. Thanks.
Thank you. Mrs. Rose?
Thank you, Mrs. Ziegler. It's a well-thought-out plan, and very much appreciated. I'm very happy that the parents are signing off when they look to get support, that is free if they don't qualify, for example, for Medicaid. Historically, that's when we lost families in that process of that application being denied, and no one knew that they weren't getting services. So that, for me, is huge and is significant in your data results, which are good. My question is case management and accountability to get the data you're getting and to reflect the processes that you have in place. Who decides who is the case manager at each school level? Who's monitoring the accountability of the process there in that case management? Is it always the school psychologist or the personnel you have listed? How is that decided? And then how is the accountability monitored at the district level of those individual school pieces?
So at the school level, when we have our SCS and our care teams come together, and let's say that there's a child that is having difficulty and they've made a referral out to an outside agency. So the school themselves are identifying who that case manager is going to be. And so each school has it set up a little bit differently. Some people manage an entire grade. Some have a band that they look at. Some schools, it's one of the counselors manages all of those referrals. In some instances where we are having difficulty making connections, then our district team comes in, as the MHeart team comes in, and that person in that role takes that off of the school because we know that we want to make sure that our school staff are able to provide all of the supports and interventions to our students that they can. And if we have other folks who can kind of make sure that we are managing the dotting the I's, crossing the T's component, we're going to do that. And so our district personnel will take that on. Dr. Frost, who has done a wonderful job this year as our Executive Director of Student Services in her first year in the role, has really led the team to do just what you had talked about, Mrs. Rose, which is identifying, where are the areas that need continuous support? Where do we have systems that are in place that are replicable, that we can start to build out those really positive systems, processes, structures within our schools so that we are ensuring that we are able to maintain all the students. So when we're looking at those components, so the school-based site, again, it's a little bit different in each school, but every child has somebody who's identified to be their case manager. And then when it does go to those outside agent referrals for the outside agencies, our MHeart team are the ones who are monitoring all of those. We actually look at that data monthly to say how many students have been referred, how many have been connected, how many have begun those services. When we looked at the data slide that Dr. Johnson shared about completed, that means that they've been successfully dismissed from the therapeutic service. And so when we look at those numbers, completed doesn't necessarily just mean, well, I went to 10 out of 10 appointments and sessions. It was, I have made such great progress that I have completed the goals that have been established for us. So we look at that monthly. And then one of the other pieces that Dr. Frost and the team have been able to do each month this past year is we provide almost like a student services snapshot for each school. So every principal receives that at the beginning of every month, and it shows all of the kind of student services data that goes along with that. The number of referrals that we've had, the number of connections we've had. We do look at discipline. Data is kind of part of that. That's a way that's going to be extended into next school year. So we do have those systematic processes in place where we are making sure that, we're making those connections. And if we are seeing that there's a gap, we intervene from the district level to support the school to make sure that we're connecting our students to the services.
Well, certainly Dr. Frost has the experience and know how to do the things that you have shared. I encourage you to look at the school-based piece traditionally, and I think that my colleagues have touched on it directly or indirectly. Some are overloaded and others may not be, and things become hardwired at the school level. And I encourage that the benefit of having Dr. Frost and yourself and your team look at specifically what is the case management on those school-wide support teams and what is the case management when it goes to care. I've experienced firsthand over multiple years, as I'm sure Dr. Frost has, and those of you on this team, that it isn't always in the best benefit of the highest quality process. Some people get overwhelmed, and Ms. Marinelli touched on that, and others, and it's just because that's the way it was always done. But it sounds like you have your arms wrapped around that and certainly have the expertise at hand. But I just wanted to point that out because I think it is worthy to focus in on. But well done, great team. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Barker.
Sorry, when I go first, then I have other thoughts later as I hear other people talk. The first question that came to me when you were talking about discipline, I'm wondering, do we have any data on like out-of-school suspensions or in-school suspensions, and whether or not our interventions have helped to lessen some of that, or whether we're still seeing kind of the same number or an increased number?
And we do. So we do monitor that as we start to look at especially for those students. One of the other pieces that we kind of pull in there are repeat offenders. And so when we do look at students who have, multiple suspensions, let's say, we are putting into place Mrs. O'Day had talked about behavior intervention plans. We're looking at implementing those and developing those through that functional behavioral assessment to address some of those behaviors with those students. Working and so drilling that down, I'm looking at that as is that a barrier to success in class? How does that connect to academics? How does it connect to attendance? I know at the secondary level with Dr. Green and our team, looking at part of that is Project 10, making sure that that's not a barrier towards graduation. And so absolutely, we monitor that on a very regular basis, and we do help to provide those supports if schools need additional supports for students. As Mrs. O'Day had mentioned, we have district staff that we actually have a process where weekly, twice a week, we are reviewing those requests from our schools. So we have a communication system in place where if Kirk has just tearing up the pea patch, the school can put that in to say, hey, we need some additional support for Kirk because he's really struggling in class. The leadership team on the student support services, which includes ESC, includes academic intervention, included our student services team, reviews every single one of those requests and identifies what's our plan of action to support that and who's going to communicate that. And then we follow back up with the principal to help support the team so it is a collective effort. So we are looking at that on a very regular basis, multiple times a week. We are reviewing this, especially for some of those really cases that are very urgent that need that support.
Would it be possible to see some of that data for the previous 2 school years?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
We'll pull that together.
Thank you.
So when we do that board work session on attendance and behavior data, we'll look at the totality of the 3 years by quartile, and a lot of what you're asking, how does that correlate? Where's the impact? Where are we still chasing impact? All of that will be presented in totality. But one other point to bring up that you'll hear more about as we start the school year also is the MTSS pilot that has been aggressively pursued. And we're going into our pilot year. We were in creation for a year. Now we're piloting at the schools that were part of the creation year, led by I almost call her Miss Marinelli, Miss Minelli and Dr. Green. And they've also come up with, not only we have our comprehensive tiered instruction plan, which aligns to academics and how we support students, but they've come up with a comprehensive tiered instruction plan for behavior, which pulls in additional supports and protocols and resources. When I have a kid that is doing this, what do we do? So there's a lot of work being done. We just haven't shared a lot of it yet because the cake was baking and we like to put the frosting, the sprinkles and everything and then share. So we're really excited about that. But it is based on the data and the experiences that we've seen over the past 3 years.
Could we break it down eventually between the schools that are piloting the MTSS and schools that have not yet started?
Yeah, and we'll have the schools that have started the pilot, which will be this year. They're working in pre-planning week to launch that with their staffs, and then they continue their monthly meetings with the team to assess how it's going. The resources we created, are they working? Do we need more? Do we need less? We're overwhelmed. We're doing too much. We're not doing enough. So they're going to really inform a lot of what rolls out to the whole district within the following year.
Very good. And then I realized I forgot to mention that I know you all, Student Services, is working on increasing our partnership with our outside providers who are already doing a lot of wraparound care for our students. And it's my understanding that you'll actually be presenting some of what we're doing in the schools to the Behavioral Health Consortium. Thank you very much for doing that. And for those of you who don't know about that, it's a really remarkable group of people from across health services in the county, the sheriff's department, teen court, everybody is involved. And I love that the schools are beginning to have a face in that as well, because we're a huge part of a child's life and a huge part of the community. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Mrs. Marinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For me, what is really standing out, and I think it's important for the community and everybody to understand, there is a big difference between counseling and behavior. And behavior, we're talking, that is a whole different approach to a child. But regardless whether it is the counseling piece for the mental health or the behavior piece, the school's role is always to help that child with student achievement. So whatever those supports are in the school is for student achievement. But behavior is a whole different ballgame, whether it leads from very minimal services to the most extensive under ESE. And when you're talking about nonverbal, autistic students, and sometimes that behavior, to also the EBD, which can, as they get older, it can sometimes escalate to violent behavior. That's a whole different systems approach. And I think when our teachers are faced with that, it is critical that the administration is there to help them, because they cannot handle all of that by themselves, even if they have aides. So this is a huge, huge issue, and it's just not what's on this piece of paper, which is excellent. I think you've done an excellent job, and I think all of our staff do what they can do, but some children, they require a lot of support. And if you don't have parent peace, then it's very, very difficult. And the schools, I know. So for me, that whole behavior piece is something that is huge versus kids who need their counselors just for some counseling, whether it's for girls picking on girls and boys doing inappropriate things when they're little. That's a whole different ballgame. The behavior takes up a tremendous amount. And I just think administrators have to support, and whatever you guys are called in to support, doesn't always going to be money or whatever, because we don't have it, but how do we do the best for those children with what we have? So I think, you guys are doing an excellent job for what we have, and we're never going to be able to solve it because it's not always the school that can do it all. It's a community, and the parent is vital. And you can't force a parent. And if they know, then you just have to follow the steps and do the best for the child to make sure they're successful academically. But it takes everybody. I know, now I'm going back years. When Miss Rose was the behavior teacher, ESE, I was the school counselor. We worked together. It didn't matter. They were kids. She sometimes would see regular ed kids. We always had parent permission. So I think that's important too. Staff work together and help each other and cross over, because you can't do it any other way. Thank you all very, very much. This is excellent. And I'm glad to hear that the training is going to be for our teachers, because it's hard, especially that behavior piece. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. No, well, going last, a lot of my questions have been addressed or answered. So I want to highlight, because one of the key pieces that I had just over years in putting systems in place, there's the question of first of all, there's so many external variables of which we don't have control over, right? But the correlation and causation and looking at the data, I look forward to that coming up, because I know you guys do monitor, and there are some things that, like I said, is this actually line up, or is this just an anomaly? And so I really do look forward to that, because I think that will make a lot of sense. And I think it does help when we look at certain trends. Again, things are going to be different. These are individuals. There's a lot of variables that are different. But as we evaluate the supports or what's working, I look forward to that kind of aggregate conversation. The one question I did have, and I think maybe ask it a different way, but you had noted that the charter schools they submit their plan to us. None of them have adopted ours. Could you give an example of maybe something that's different than as a comparison to what we provide?
From my brief time in the role, I have not seen anything different, but the difference is that they want that control, at least from what I've seen, to be able to provide their own resources and receive the funds. So yes, still, if you think about all the things we have in place, from psychologists to counselors, everything else, I have not seen anything different as of yet, but they're just submitting them now. So we are reviewing them literally right now.
Okay.
Dr. Hutch, do you want to add anything, sir? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
so one of the ways that we do help support the charters in those situations, even though they aren't necessarily following our mental health allocation, if there are instances where they need initial evaluations through a school psychologist, we will provide some of those evaluations. So, and there are other times where they need additional services, and so we do have a way that we are able to support them through a contracted kind of agreement. But so there is a little bit of overlap there, but as Dr. Johnson had shared, if they are doing their own program and having their own plan and are meeting the state requirements for that, then they.
Is it fair to say they just let the contracts directly with those vendors versus working through us? Is that about a fair assessment? Okay, I'm getting the nod from Mr. Connor, just for the record. Okay, the other piece that I appreciate, Mrs. Barker brought this up, and just to clarify, because of the rollover money, and maybe Mr. Connor, you can answer this, is that considered in the non-recurring realm because of the policy that we just passed? And again, those change year over year, so how would that apply in a practical sense?
Yeah, so rollover, you have to be careful in your planning, right? Because it is basically the unspent money from the previous year, and then you're rolling that forward. It typically requirements, and not necessarily from the state allocation. A lot of federal requirements only allow you to roll over a certain percentage. Obviously, the intent is to spend that money in that fiscal year as intended for those students and supports. But in the ability to do that, we can plan out, and that's where Ms. O'Day was talking about being strategic. And this is where fund braiding becomes very important, because when you have other funding sources that you can use to supplement, let's just say we know we have one-time funding and rollover dollars in our mental health allocation, but we also know that Title IV supports the well-being of students as a part of the requirement of that grant. That is an annual allocation. So you have to think and forecast, once this one-time rollover funding is exhausted, can we leverage some other dollars from other grants that would qualify and meet those criteria? So that's the strategy in fund braiding these grant dollars or entitlement grants that you have. So it is a bit of a balancing act, because you are mixing what we intend to be an annual allocation, even though the mental health grant, listen, the legislature could next year go, hey, guess what? We've been giving you this for so many years, but it's not going to be in the FEFP next year. I don't anticipate that, but that is a reality that you could face. And then you're having to reevaluate all of those personnel on there. We know that the best supports for, specifically in this case, is the personnel. That's why 82% of the budget is based on personnel. That's where you're going to get the most effectiveness with that. It's not going to be a program out of a box or anything like that. It's going to be the personnel. But there is planning and strategy to keep yourself from getting into a position where you're having to eliminate positions reoccurring.
Okay. And that makes sense. And I do think that even going back to the data piece of it, of really being able to narrow down as best as possible so that, as we have been able to do successfully in conversations with members of the legislature, not saying we just want more money, but we have actually supportive data that illustrates that what's working, what's not working, where deficits are. So I look forward to that. And with that, you answered the completed question, so thank you for it, because I had a question about what that meant specifically. And then as we look at, Mrs. Marinelli mentioned behavior, so if I'm looking ahead at the upcoming.
Because ultimately, we want kids to be prepared to matriculate through our system. And so we have to address everything. So we'll definitely dive into more of that, not the student achievement, but all the other factors that tie into that outcome.
Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate it. I think you guys hit on all of the very critical components that I think this is a big issue. It's a substantial impediment, and a lot of times to a child's academic success, and there are going to be resource limitations and just role limitations and all of those, but I think that everything, the way it was addressed, has been done in just such a with high integrity, and I really appreciate that. I think it's really important, and I think that's imperative. Just looking historically and looking ahead, what will really bring everyone to the table. So I appreciate all of the work that you are doing, and I look forward to future data. I see Mr. Edwards, you're recognized, and we'll close on this topic.
Thanks. When we get to that place, I liked what Mrs. Ziegler said about we will have limitations. Can that be addressed? Can we know what those limitations are? Thanks.
And thank you, everyone, for this very informative discussion and report. And that will conclude the first item. And then, Mr. Connor, if you want to move us into the second item.
Thank you. So we're going to move into item number 2, which is exploring some revenue opportunities. What I believe is a continuation of our conversation at our last meeting. There are 4 major areas that I'd like to have the board discuss as we approach the tentative budget, looking towards, obviously, our adopted budget in the next few months. Any opportunities that we can take to find revenue is a consideration that I think this board needs to discuss and evaluate the potential impact of that. That being, first off, our food nutrition, our meal pricing, our facility rentals, our fingerprint fees, and our athletic fees. These, some of them have more substantial impacts than others, but we've done an analysis that the board is privy to. We're going to share that publicly today, and then talk about and have some discussion around what are some of the considerations that we want to move forward with currently and maybe put off a year or so that we can address some of those financial barriers that school districts are facing. So I'm going to start with Ms. Sarah Dan, who is our Director of Food Nutrition, and Dr. Hutchinson and Jody Dumas to talk about food nutrition services.
Thank you so much, Superintendent and Board. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you today. We wanted to take a brief moment and just kind of discuss our meal program, where we stand in terms of our food nutrition services team, and we have our dynamic directors here with us, Sarah Dan, to be able to help answer any specific questions that we may have after our presentation. When we think about our food service program and our nutrition program, I think one of the pieces that I want to highlight is that we have a fabulous program when it comes to the meals that we provide. They've won numerous awards across the entire state and are recognized for doing phenomenal work. I think one of the unique pieces that is important for everyone to understand about our food service program is that it really is an internal service fund, which means it has to be 100% self-funded. And so when we think about that, Mrs. Dan and our team, we're running 54 restaurants basically across our entire school district, and you'll probably be the largest restaurateur in Sarasota County, right? So, with our 54 franchises. But it's really important to recognize that everything that we have through the funding of our food service program comes from the revenue that's generated through our breakfast and lunch sales and our a la carte sales. And so it's a little different in that sense than some of our other components when we look at funding sources. And so if we can go to the next slide, thank you, sir. So just like everybody else, knowing that over the last several years, we are looking at increased costs, and there have been a number of influences that go along with that, and we have not been immune to that. If any of us take our families out to dinner, you recognize that even going out to dinner, the prices have increased, and that is through supply chain needs, just increase in costs in terms of labor and benefits. Looking at some of our most popular items that we serve in the cafeteria are Uncrustables. Everybody loves a good peanut butter and jelly Uncrustable, right? Our tater tots, applesauce, those have increased anywhere from 50 to 140+% over the last couple of years. And so that absolutely has an impact when it comes to ensuring that, again, we have that 100% self-funding as we go throughout each fiscal year. And one other piece that goes along with that, just like everything else, we do receive some federal reimbursement for our food that we are providing to our students, but even the reimbursement has not matched what the increased costs have been over the course of the years. And so this is a piece that we are always looking at. We have gone through a number of different strategies and ways to help mitigate some of those impacts when we look at rising costs. Ms. Dan and Mr. Dumas have done a wonderful job of really things that we may not even think of. Like we've been able to save $100,000 because we changed a type of brand of chicken that we were using. The quality remained the same, but we were able to cut back on that expense. We're looking at, we joined a purchasing consortium, which allows us to engage in purchases of bulk, which again has saved a couple of $200,000 in that process. Utilizing some food reimbursements and grants through USDA has enabled us to have some additional cost savings. However, with all of those pieces that we've put in place to kind of mitigate the impact of those expenses, we still are looking at a scenario where we do have to discuss the option of a meal price increase. And so, currently our breakfast price across the entire district is $2.25, and that helps to provide a nutritious and delicious breakfast to any of our children, again, all the way through elementary, middle, and high school who would be interested in participating in that. We are proposing increasing that by 25 cents, so that would be a price of $2.50 as we look towards next school year. For our elementary lunch, it's currently $3.25. Our secondary lunch is $3.75, and our recommendation is to increase that by 40 cents, respectively, so that we would have $3.65 for an elementary lunch cost, $4.15 for a secondary lunch cost. When we look at that based on the number of meals and that we are serving every year, that would be an approximate $600,000 increase in revenue coming into the department. However, that is not necessarily the only piece that we're going to be working on to reduce those expenditures and make sure that we are meeting our bottom line, because we're not looking to necessarily balance this on the backs of our families. We're taking a lot of other steps as well as we are walking through this process. We have had in the screen in front of you, I just want to share this comparison between our neighboring districts and some other like size and demographically similar districts. With this particular recommendation, we still would fall right in line with Manatee, Charlotte, Pasco, and Seminole counties when we're looking at the cost of our meals. You may notice in the blue section, that's the 25-26 meal prices. Some of our neighboring districts have already, in the green section, have decided they are going to increase their pricing. You may notice, and I do want to call out Charlotte. Charlotte was under a unique food program that allowed all of their meals this past school year to be free. They no longer are eligible for that. So when you see Charlotte's going from a free, let's say, secondary lunch to a $4.15 lunch, I mean, that's a significant increase from there. So, in comparison, when we're looking at a 40-cent request, it fits right in line with where all of the other districts would fall. And then one of the reasons behind this is we are trying to kind of mitigate, again, the impact that we would have as we do have to have a self-sustaining organization here in food service. You can see that we have two comparisons here of what would our internal fund balance look like. So just as we talked about some roll forward dollars on the academic side, we have had some roll forward dollars that we have utilized in food service over the last couple of years. However, each year, those costs again continue to increase, and we are using that roll forward. In the green column, you'll notice that that is if we adopt the meal price recommendation, we would still utilize the $1.386 million fund balance that we have. So we would actually go through that fund balance because we do in anticipation of, increased costs from our suppliers and all of the components that go along with that we still, even with the increase, would be operating at a deficit next year of just about $800,000. Without that, we would be looking at closer to a $1.4 million deficit as we look at our fund balance at the end of the 26-27 school year. And then as we look ahead, we aren't just looking at this as a one-stop shop to try and address this. We are working through a number of different considerations so that we are able to try and mitigate the expenses and make sure that anywhere where we can pull some savings, even if, looking at reduction in some of our staff. We've had vacant positions that we haven't filled because, again, all of that, the salary and benefits of our team, all come from the revenue that's generated through our meal program. And so if we were to do nothing in the fund balance impact, you can kind of see what we've projected out that negative balance would be over the next several years. But we are looking at things like how can we continue to reduce our expenses? What can we do in terms of helping to decrease some of the supply chain costs that we're able to control, like joining the purchasing consortium and being able to purchase at volume? We also have a list of items that we have put in place and other things that we can consider moving forward. Some of them, like getting rid of chocolate milk might be a nuclear option kind of thing, but, certainly we are putting everything on the table. I know my kids would have died if they didn't have chocolate milk, and I understand. Me too, right? So, but we are looking at anything and everything, and I share that because I don't want this to say like, well, we're just looking to solve this problem by asking to raise meal prices. It is part of a multi-pronged approach to ensure the solvency of our program here. So our recommendation for consideration would be a 25-cent increase in the breakfast meal cost and a 40-cent increase in the lunch cost.
All right, so that's the first one. Madam Chair, would you like to stop there before we go to the next one, or do you want to roll through all four options?
Are there any immediate questions on the food, or would you like to hear all of them together? I'm fine with just rolling through if you guys can take your notes down. So proceed with these popular options.
Okay, great. All right. So the next option is not as painful, we'll say. So we, every few years, and this is something that we do on a regular basis anyways, we evaluate our facility rental costs, and Mr. Dumas and the team have done a great job of working with Facilitron, which manages our facility rentals, to say, when it comes to, our rentals, and are we aligned to what market rates would be? And so we have used this as an opportunity to engage in that review of where do we stand when it comes to the rental rates that we provide to our community partners. And we absolutely love that we have beautiful facilities. Our custodial team and facilities team, they are top-notch. They do incredible work, and the community wants to utilize our facilities, and we want to be able to partner with them. But we also recognize, right, that the primary function of our schools is for teaching and learning, and we want to make sure that we are able to, if we have an event in after hours, that we're able to turn that back around so that it's in perfect condition for teaching and learning to occur in the subsequent day. And so when we look at our comparison, if you would like to change the slide, Mr. Connor, thank you. When we discussed this last month, we did not have Charlotte and Manatee. We had to do a little bit of digging to get that information, so appreciate the time to pull that together. You can see that we do have Charlotte and Manatee has been added in here along with Pinellas and Seminole again. One thing I would like to share is that this is not necessarily an apples to apples comparison when we look at how do we, let's say, how do we identify an auditorium, which we might call an auditorium at elementary or middle school level, but other districts may call their high school auditoriums, but we call them performing arts centers. And so there is not quite 100% alignment when we go through here. You can also see in some areas we offer up, let's say, our media centers, our libraries for rental. Other places do not. We offer our kitchen. Other places do not. And so there's just some other components that go along with that. with kind of the biggest piece being, again, those differences between auditoriums and how they classify performing arts centers. When you look at this particular chart, you'll notice that there are a number of different columns. Ultimately, we have a rate that we charge for nonprofits. So those are going to be, not-for-profit organizations that would like to utilize our facilities. We then also have a separate rate that we are charging for-profit organizations who, let's say I run a sports camp and a sports team and I want to rent out a gym. I'm going to receive a different rate or a higher rate because I am making a profit off of that. And then we also do have an hourly utilities fee that we build into that. We want to make sure that we're able to, one, cover the cost of operating those facilities during the time that our outside agencies are utilizing them, plus that we have the resources to be able to bring our staff back in so that we can get that space ready for teaching and learning the next day. So if you look at the next, so those were our kind of current rates in comparison. If you look at our proposed rates, again, you'll see we've put this into 5 columns. The column all the way on your left-hand side will identify the area. And then the subsequent columns are looking at what our current rate is for nonprofit and for profit, and then what our proposed rates are for profit and nonprofit as well. Excuse me, the green and the orange columns are the proposed rates. Most of these look at nominal increases when you look at the hourly rate. For our nonprofits, it's approximately $10 an hour across the board if you wanted to try to find an average there. For our for-profit, it's approximately $20 across the board per hour, with a range of anywhere between $5 to $100 an hour being the largest. The largest increase really was the Performing Arts Center component, and increasing that rate, which makes that more in line with what market rates are across our areas and comparable counties. So what that would mean for us in terms of potential revenue, this last year, we brought in, using our regular rates that we have, approximately $373,000 in rental rates. If we were to have that same rate frequency with the new proposed rates, it would equate to just about $515,000, which is just around $142,000 increase in revenues that would come in to support the schools, but more importantly, also make sure that we are competitive across the market, but that we have the ability then to cover the operating costs and the cleaning costs and the preparation costs of those spaces as our outside partners and agencies are using those. So it works out to just overall about a 38% increase, again, helping to offset the costs that are associated with us maintaining the rental spaces.
All right, so our next option is fingerprinting fees. So as you know from our last conversation, we talked about the new requirement to transition our current employees from the FDLE screening system into the AHCA Care Provider Background Screening Clearinghouse. This is a mandate for all school districts, and all of our employees are mandated to be in that new clearinghouse by the end of this fiscal year. So that process is ongoing. In the last year, we estimated about 2,200 employees were fingerprinted and into the new clearinghouse, and going into this year, there'll be another 4,000 to 4,300 that will need to be entered in there. The cost for each of these employees to go into that system runs $60 per person. So going into this year, we've already basically subsidized the cost for $132,000 for last year, and are looking as projecting another $261,900 in continued expense going into this year to ensure that we are meeting that compliance. So that is one of those expenses that maybe the bulk of it will be at this time, but moving forward, as we go through every 5 years, there will be an additional fee to keep that up to date. So this will not go away, although it will subside a little bit, but that is the projected revenue loss just to be in compliance with this. And it was a mandate that was not provided in any funding to school districts to move that to that level. There's also the screening cost for volunteers. So right now, we are screening our volunteers and our level ones. We subsidize the cost of all of our level one volunteers. Last year, we processed over 4,800 volunteers, and we collected zero revenue for that. So we did eat that cost of roughly $120,000. When you look at our level two, that becomes substantially more to complete that level of a background. It is an estimated cost of about $102. We do charge a nominal fee of $38, which is well below the market rate and where we're at in comparison to our neighboring school districts. But that is, and again, another subsidized approach that we will eat about $100,000 for that level two screening process. So just in comparison to Manatee, Charlotte, and Lee, which are neighboring to us, they're running from 75, 65, and 90, depending on the county. We're running well below that at $38. And it is something that we would love to continue to look at and do, because we know the importance of having volunteers, and we never want that to be a barrier for us, but there's also an expense that goes along with that. So the current fee structure per screening, obviously when we have a new employee and they go through a background screening, that is an estimated cost of about $90, and we do have a fee for $90. We do pay for all of our mandated transition into the clearinghouse, but that does cost us about $70 per person. Our volunteers, again, the fee is $38, but it costs us around $80 to $90. Level one volunteers, we are not currently charging, but that is about a $5 cost. Guest speakers as well is a $5 cost. And our contractors, we pretty much cover the fee for our contract. They cover the fee for their screening there. So when we look at proposed options for aligning our level two volunteers to where our neighboring districts are, I am recommending that the board discuss increasing the current fee from $38. My proposal is to meet a little bit in the middle at $75. It's not going to cover the complete cost of the volunteer fee. It's about $102, but it will help mitigate some of the impact there. And then we have a new opportunity that has been presented through legislation around athletic fees. School districts are tackling this issue currently because sports is an opportunity for schools to there's a lot of expense that goes along with having sports, whether you're talking about equipment, the officials, just managing the game, all of the things, the transportation that is involved, paying coaches. There are some operational expenses that become burdensome, and even when you're doing ticket sales and all of that, it does not cover the cost. And a lot of times it's your bigger sports like football that have to help subsidize the smaller sports because they take a bigger gate than the others. And so it's putting pressure on individual schools to maintain and keep, having officials come to these games, be scheduled on time, making sure all the equipment stays up to date. Just reconditioning your helmets in football is a huge expense each and every year. So the legislation has changed to allow school districts to charge a participation fee to homeschool and private school students who are participating in our district managed sports, as well as you have the ability to charge any student that is currently in our school system a fee up to a certain amount. Now, I know this is a very new thing for us to discuss, and we also know how much athletics is very beneficial for all of our students, and we never want to have money be a barrier for students participating in something that really engages them and motivates them to be in school. But I do know that at some point, I want the board to at least have the discussion that the reality is there is an expense, there is a cost, and it's not something that we are provided funding for through the FEFP or any other sources other than ticket sales. That this be a discussion for us down the road. I'm not proposing that we necessarily take any action for 26, 27, but that the board be considering that for future years. So when you take all in culmination of the recommendations here, I'll just recap. When we look at our student meal prices going into next school year, as Dr. Hutchison said, I am proposing that we do increase all of our breakfast across all grade levels by 25 cents, so that would bring it to $2.50, as well as 40 cents for lunch at at secondary and elementary. So that would be $33.65 for elementary and $4.15 for secondary. Our rental rates, again, just to bring them into the market comparison, that could range as little as $25 to $75, depending on what facility and area they're renting. To about a 38% on average increase from where we currently are will generate some revenue for us. Obviously, the mandates are pressuring our budgets right now by hundreds of thousands of dollars. So looking at the increase of our volunteer fees for level 2 to raise that from $38 to $75, and as well as just continuing to have conversation around the potential for sports participation within the school district. Maybe not this year, but into the next year. So I will turn it back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to ask one real quick question and I'll open it up. As it pertains to the fingerprinting, how long are they good for? I don't know if it's Mr. Connor.
5 years.
5 years.
Yes.
Okay. And was it 5 years before? Okay. So that's standard. So we just have to redo everyone. All right. Members of the board, any questions, comments on the proposed options from the superintendent? No one is eager.
I have a question.
Mrs. Rose, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Relative to facility rentals, is every school and every facility in every school being managed through Facilitron?
That is correct, and I'll allow Mr. Dumas to speak on that. One of the things we did during the Summer Leadership Institute, because this is an area that I believe could be shored up in ensuring that every time a facility is used by one of these organizations, that we are doing the appropriate charges. I know sometimes in the past, there's maybe been precedents where a group has been historically using the gym, for instance, and maybe they just have it worked out amongst the school and they've been getting it maybe at a low rate or no rate. We have to be very true and consistent moving forward. And so one of the things we've done with Facilitron is make sure everything's accounted for, the rates are very clear, and the process and procedures for managing that is assigned to someone at that school and has to be done with fidelity. So that's been a major priority for us this summer. Anything else you want to add?
No, absolutely agree. Everything's through Facilitron, and we took an additional step where we retrained everybody at the school sites who's responsible for managing the rental process. So they're all on board with what the fees are and what can be waived, what shouldn't be waived, those types of things. But then we've also included another step in every rental where somebody at Facility Services does a final check to make sure there is nothing that's been missed, not included in the rental, and all costs are accounted for before the rental is actually approved.
So specifically at Riverview, because I'm getting questions from the public, they can do rentals of that auditorium through Facilitron
Absolutely.
currently, right now.
Correct.
Thank you.
And our brand new high school, Welland Park, is being added as we speak, so that'll be available
Okay.
too.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? I believe the superintendent's looking for direction. Mrs. Marinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I've been thinking a lot of this since we brought it up at our last meeting, and as hard as it is, we can't run in the red, whether it's our school lunch program, whether it's the fingerprinting. And when you say we're still going to be running into the red, even with these increases, I don't think that's fiscally smart. So we might have to even raise them further. My concern is I want to make sure our food, our kids get, and I know you do, but the quality and the amount of food that they get doesn't change because they need that nutrition. And I know just every time I go to Publix, or I never shopped at Walmart, and sometimes I do now, which kills me, but I do because everything has gone up. You cannot get away from it. And I don't think the public understands we don't get the monies. We're self-sufficient for food and nutrition. So we have to raise the prices, as hard as that is, because that's the one that gives me the most angst, is our food and nutrition. Facilities, we have wonderful facilities, so I think anybody that wants to rent them, they need to pay, because that's also custodial, working late, that involves a whole lot. So I don't have a problem with that. And the fingerprinting, I don't think we can keep running in the red. The only concern I have is for our young beginning teachers. You know, $90 is $90 when you're just starting out. So I don't have an answer for that. If there's any kind of sliding scale, if we're going to cut anybody a break for that, I would think it'd be our young beginning teachers. But, and the athletics, as long as we follow like the students that need the help, that they get the help, that I think falls, my talking to Superintendent Connor, that falls under the same, like the food nutrition, you'd be on a sliding scale for that. I just think we're in a whole different world. We just need to communicate to the public of what is going on. We're just not considering raising prices to raise prices. We can't run in the red. So I think it's irresponsible if me as a board member says we can still run in the red. So we need to adjust, but let the public know why. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
See, we can agree. When I got here, I think we had 2 years in a row where we had to take from the fund balance and move $5 million over to food. But at that time, our percentage of fund balance was 17%. And so it was actually our pleasure. But when healthcare has gone up 45% since I've got here, and everything else, and with the voucher program having the impact that it's had in the last year, I totally agree that it's irresponsible for a board to keep allowing these prices and across the board. So I appreciate the fact that we're bringing this up, but I think the public is experiencing their own problems with their household budget and can certainly understand what the school district is going through. So I just have a couple of deeper dive questions. In the food service presentation, I saw the sunset of 8 managerial positions. We went from 12 to 4. Was that in 1 year, or was that because positions were just open year over year over year and we decided to finally close them?
Probably about 15 years ago, we implemented 12-month managers to help cover our summer food service program. As those people have left or moved into other positions, we have not refilled them because there's been some changes in summer school. And with that, and even our participation in our community feeding has decreased. So to be physically responsible, we've just not replaced them.
Okay, that makes me feel better, and I wanted
Yeah.
to also to highlight to the public that nothing's suffering because we went from 8 or 12 to 4.
Yeah,
We've
no one
already
is-
absorbed that.
Yeah, no one
Okay.
has lost, there's not been a loss or a layoff as a result of that. It's just when people have made different decisions, moved into different positions, we have moved those positions back to our 10-month positions.
I call that continuous improvement. Okay.
Just adjusting with the times.
While I have you, when was the last time we took a meal increase?
So we did it 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Before that, there were long stretches. Unfortunately, with just what is going on with reimbursement rates and food costs, we just have not been able to do that. Our surrounding neighbors, for example, Manatee County, has had to increase meal prices every year.
Got it. So what I'm also seeing now, just again, because I want to get to a place where we're not dipping into the fund balance. We can't do that. We don't have that cushion anymore. Period. End of statement. I mean, look at our budget process that we're looking at now. So if we do this increase, we still are hitting the fund balance to the tune of $800,000. So And that's with a rollover from last year's appropriation from the fund balance. Am I saying all that correctly? So what has been the appropriation from the fund balance, let's say, over the last 3 years?
So our fund balance is a separate fund balance. We have been spending into that fund balance as a result of the increase in wages, benefits, and then also food costs. So we have consistently worked on coming up with cost-saving measures, a little bit here, a little bit there.
I'm with you. You don't have to defend yourself.
No, I know that. We know that this isn't the complete answer, and we have some additional things in place. We have a couple schools that will be dual managed this school year, in order to save about $500,000. So we're hoping at the end of the year, I watch this every month. The other thing that we've implemented, oh, she's gone, is we were able to finally tap into a cost-saving measures with our mainline food vendor. It's a quick pay service where we can pay our bills. And we have been working this whole school year to get this up and running. And just in the last month, we were able, through quick pay, to receive a cost-saving benefit of $1,230. And that's just under summer food. That's not our mainline food bid when in the regular school year for the 54 restaurants.
So where I'm headed here is we should start by saying free and reduced is still free and reduced.
Yes.
Regardless of hikes. But I want to prepare the public, because I agree with Mrs. Marinelli, we shouldn't be operating in the red. End of discussion. And so without looking at a 50% increase, I think we should really be proposing a stepped up increase, and that perhaps an additional charge after the first of the year might look like another 25 cents, so that we're chipping away at that $800,000 fund balance. And so I'm throwing that out there for the board's consideration to think about. It's a step process to get it to where it's self-sustaining, because we don't have the funds like we used to cover those costs. My other thought is, we do have a lot of spaces that are available for rentals. How well do we market them? How well do our nonprofits and our businesses and I'm not sure we're not facilitroned every day, all the time, and I'd like to try and find a way to increase those.
So other than the Facilitron site itself, which when a prospective renter goes there, they can see all of our facilities. We've got pictures of all the sites there. And when they work with a Facilitron representative, it's a phone call to them. They get their organization set up, profit, nonprofit, and then they work through what do we have available, what are the types of spaces we rent. So we rely on really the Facilitron staff to do that. Internally, we do not typically advertise on any of our spaces as rental opportunities.
I'm looking at our communications department to think about how they might be able to put that in our newsletters and on our website, and places where parents who have jobs and are working and that might need space rentals. So I'm just throwing that out as another idea to increase revenue.
And Ms. O'Day mentioned in my ear to remind everybody that depending on the space, some of them are very attractive. And so like you had mentioned, the RPAC, the VPAC, the Performing Arts Center in Northport, those schedules are typically booked out at least 1 year, sometimes 2 years in advance. So I think to your question, your point, it depends on the space, but there's certainly opportunity in like classroom spaces and things like that.
Yeah, I think we have capacity is my point, and I'd like to explore that as an additional revenue opportunity. You may want to talk, but if I look at for example, the Booker Black Box Theater, it's pretty dormant, and I don't know that enough people know that that it could be available for a rental, and that's my point. So, and our cafeterias can be utilized, and It also is additional revenue that our classified staff might find useful, especially if they're working overtime in the evening. So I just throw it all out there to go there. I have another question. I know I ran this by the superintendent. In terms of the fingerprinting, I think Ms. Marinelli or someone touched on it about entry-level teachers. The other category I would throw there are substitutes that fingerprinting might be a challenge for, so I want to look at that. But in terms of volunteers, what I'm thinking is that we could ask for the fingerprinting cost as a donation to the school. So in other words, if you cover it, it is a donation that the person can decide. So of the 4,800 people that we process for free, if we said to them, by the way, it costs $98, donate here. And it could go into a separate pool so that at least there's money available to cover costs for people that can't afford it. So I'm throwing that out as another idea for the board and the district to consider, and that covers all the things that I wrote about.
Thank you, Mrs. Barker.
Thanks. I have a couple things. I appreciate this conversation. I agree. We cannot operate in the red. That's a problem. That said, I'm wondering, is there any utility? So all of my 4 children buy school lunch every day. So we are consumers of your restaurants, and we thank you. Because frankly, I don't know that I could make all my children lunch for the same price that they buy it at school. Truly, at least these days. So, I am personally going to take on this increased cost. So for the public to understand that, I'm right there with you. But I'm wondering, I noticed when I was serving meals during school lunch week or whatever, which was just lovely. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to do that. That it seemed to me that there were fewer students than I expect utilizing the meal program. And I'm not sure why that is, because I absolutely love it. And I'm wondering, is there any utility in a more aggressive advertising to families about what our meals are, and to Mr. Edwards' point about you're getting lots of jobs here today, Craig, but could we do make it a little easier, more user-friendly, something really colorful in what we're putting out to families about why they could utilize school lunch? Would that help at all, or does that just mean increased costs and it kind of just gets all canceled out?
No, we get tremendous support from PR, and we're always exploring more opportunities to get the word out. We have seen a shift in participation demographics, and that is one of our challenges. And I don't know if it's I've not had the opportunity to see if it's a shift in students maybe out of the district, because we do feed quite a few charter schools as well. But we are seeing a shift in the students that are free, that eat with us, and meaning a decrease. And I'll just, it was something I looked at while I was listening to the other presentations. From the 24-25 school year to the 25-26 school year, and the state of Florida seeing this, our decrease in directly certified students, so those are students that automatically qualify, decreased 2,596 students. That being said, if all of them ate with us, and that's probably maybe a little aggressive, that is $2.2 million worth of revenue, because the reimbursement rates for a free meal is about $4.70. The reimbursement for a paid meal is about 55 cents. So that is one of the challenges that we are just, I think is just kind of the shift in our just our community. I know, just in talking with other food service directors throughout the entire state of Florida, every school district is seeing this right now. So there's just lots of factors. We are still waiting for the reimbursement rates to come out for this next school year. We're anticipating them every day. We anticipated the information we shared with you does include the price of food from away from home. So we have a rough estimate, but maybe the reimbursement rates are going to come out higher. But we aren't 100% sure of what that's going to look at. So in what you had said, there's just a lot of factors in our world that are a little bit of a moving target right now.
That's interesting because I have had families approach me with, the changes to immigration enforcement and saying they're fearful to fill out free and reduced lunch forms. And I remind them that really that you don't need to be afraid of that. We're not in that business here in schools, but I do think that is another piece, an unintended consequence of some things that are happening
Absolutely.
nationwide.
And as you know, that information is so protected. Each year, our principals have to sign confidentiality agreements. We started this school year a process, thanks to our amazing IT team, where our families now who qualify for free and reduced have those letters in their parent portal. As an extra step, even though a registrar doesn't go into the parent portal side, I personally trained every registrar on the confidentiality of free and reduced, just because we want to protect our parents' confidentiality. Meal benefits, we know sometimes our families feel like that if they're on meal benefits, they're taking away from another student. That's not the case. And any family that does apply, if they feel like they are going to benefit from that, and it's worth them applying. The application isn't open yet. They're in the middle of the rollover, but it will be open soon. And we want our families from last year who are on meal benefits are covered for the first 30 days of school. And then our team who handles free and reduced, we actually meet every week and we talk about families that might be in trouble. But with 44,000 students, we miss a few from time to time, but we really do try to work with the principals and look for families that are in trouble. But that confidentiality piece is in place. So hopefully families will feel safe to apply if they need the help.
I appreciate that. I think that messaging is really important because I sort of, my jaw dropped when you said the number of students that we have that could qualify, or that we used to have qualify for that and that are not doing that right now. In terms of facility rentals, when was the last time that we updated our Facilitron fees?
I believe the last time the board did a full update of the rental fees was in 2020.
So at least 6 years.
It has been. We look at them every year and try to compare to kind of not only other school districts, but the local economy, right? So if we're renting the RPAC, we're comparing that to the Van Wezel and what they're renting for. But formal adoption of new rental fees was 2020.
Thank you, that's helpful. And do those Facilitron fees include like school-based clubs, like the Booker Bakery that uses the kitchen and the cafeteria and they, meet after school and have that really cool program? Do they have to pay as well?
So when we've got programs like that directly benefit the students at the school, then we waive those fees. Every one, even though you see profit and nonprofit, there are some intricacies even within those groups, and you've pointed out one of them. So if we've got a direct benefit to the students at the school, then we're not charging and taking away some of the revenue that they're bringing in. So we work with schools to make sure students are not having to pay for things that a normal outside agency would have to.
Wonderful. Thank you for clearing that up. And then with regard to the athletic activity fee, I just would again reiterate that I do think we need to continue. That should remain on the table, although I'm fine with putting it off for a little bit. For fingerprinting, is there any financial assistance already in place, or would we consider financial assistance in place for parents who cannot pay the fee?
Absolutely, yeah. I think we definitely want to look at the free and reduced lunch is typically one of our criteria that we use as a baseline, and so that could be the criteria that we set. since we do have that information and be able
Okay.
to ascertain it.
And then do any of our neighboring districts charge for the level 1 volunteer? None.
They
So
do.
they do charge for the level 1 volunteer, just like your typical, like you go in to help with the Christmas party? Okay, thank you. All right, that's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Rose.
Thank you, Mrs. Ziegler. Relative to facility rentals, is there still a percentage of the revenue that goes to the actual school, or does that all go to the district now?
So it's a very small percentage. So, on every rental, there is an admin fee that's tacked on to every hour of the rental. It's a very small piece of it. That's the only thing that stays at the school site. But it recognizes the time that either an AP or somebody at the school had to facilitate that rental. So very small. Most comes back to the district because expenses from the cost of the rental, whether it be maintenance of the site, the custodial, the electricity, the HVAC, is all district-borne expenses. So the majority of all the rental revenue comes back to district to reimburse for those costs.
So it isn't, the percentage of revenue that goes to the school is actual revenue, or it's covering the basic cost to the school?
It is covering the cost of the time spent for the administrators having to facilitate that rental. It's certainly not over and above what we're expending as part of that. Does that
Well,
make sense?
essentially, it's not a revenue account that's building.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you, and I would like to add that we can't operate in the red. It's virtually impossible.
Mrs. Marinelli.
I just have one question, because I honestly don't remember. Us board members, do we pay for our fingerprinting? Did I pay? Okay. I was going to say good, because we should. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
So I guess for board discussion, hopefully, is how do you feel about the step-up process for food service at adding another hike after the first of the year, and also a place for volunteers to donate for their own fingerprinting?
Thank you. Okay, I have those down. So I share the same concern as when I looked over this, is that the reality as we look out to future projections in the red is very concerning. And while as any jump for a family, I mean, it's hard when we give anything, any operation, I don't care what it is, for profit, nonprofit, when you're offering customers something and you have to do an increase, it's tough. And then the question becomes, is a sliding scale is something I had written down, because this is not sustainable. I mean, that's the number one point I have. I mean, it's just not sustainable. And incremental increases are, I think, more palatable if there is honest, full visibility to that, so that it's not at the beginning of the year, boom, with on top of all the school supplies and new clothes and all of those things. But that there's something that can be, ideally embedded into their own household budget as a plan. I mean, nobody likes a renewal for their insurance or anything when it's double digits. When you have a ramp, it does help, at least to some degree, from a forecasting. No different for us. So I would believe, as hard as it is, I think it's a reality that we do have to address, and think that, I know we are at the moment where we're looking at as we move into the next. As we start our school year in a month, the response there, but not leaving it as the end point. I mean, I don't even know if it's the beginning of the year, if we have that follow-up question, almost like a preparation of a quarterly increase, as hard as that is. And what does that look like? I'd like to propose that, because I just don't believe this is sustainable. And as unpopular as it is, if we're going to have the discussion, we might as well have an honest assessment in something that's going to actually move the department to sustainability. I don't know enough about the data, but my one question is, this may not provide the volume where it'd be beneficial, but is there anything that we've offered? For example, there are families that they know that they're buying lunches every 5 or 4 days of the year. And have we ever looked at something where it's like a lump sum up front? Because then from that, there's some cash flow opportunities, there's potentially some revenue interest that we could be gaining on that. Again, I don't know if that volume is much, because if you look at any kind of subscription, you get a reduction in cost right? But I say that because I do think we should be thinking outside the box. I think there are some families that are like, hey, I'll pay X amount for the month, and Johnny, I hope you use it, whatever, right? They don't have to think about it anymore. They can budget it into their own budget. And then if there's enough volume, then one, that helps with cash flow for your department. But if there's enough, I don't know if there's enough that you would be able to sustain even interest, revenue from the interest of that. So I just want to put that out there as a potential idea. Again, I don't know what that volume would be, but if there's a financial benefit to the families to pay up front, that alleviates some burden for you. I just want to put that out on the table. So, on the food piece, I think that we have no choice. I think it's tough, but I think it's better that we, as mentioned by other board members, that it's not sustainable. And if we're going to do it, let's try to do it right and with as much runway as the families can possibly do, but also get us out of the red. When it comes to the volunteers, so I just want to clarify, Mr. Connor. So with not volunteers, the fingerprinting, if I am to understand correctly, new employees, we are going to cover that cost, or we will not can you clarify for me? I just want to make sure I get this correct.
Well, thank you, Board. So all the new employees are actually paying the fingerprinting fee. It's all of the employees past last year that, as we're renewing them under ACA, that they are the ones that we are covering their fingerprint fees as it relates to their employment.
So all new employees would be
paying.
incurring their cost.
Correct.
Did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, just through the hiring process, right? When they're being onboarded, they're going through their fingerprinting and getting on that. That is a part of the cost there. So if they're new to the district, being hired, onboarded, a part of that
They
process is their pay.
And level two, I understand. And level one, we are proposing to continue to cover that or not?
At this time,
Okay.
unless the board wants to discuss.
No, so I saw in the notation, I do think this is somewhere that could have unforeseen consequences. I'm very hesitant to it. I believe that there's also the financial responsibility that we can't incur it. I really would love to be a fly on the wall with the negotiation at the state level when they sign this new contract, because it's very impactful. But at the same token, I believe that we have so many schools that flourish because of their volunteer network, and I believe that comes in all different households, right? I mean, some of them are senior citizens and they are not necessarily making quite a bit of money, and I don't want to, and they provide such a valuable asset to our schools. So my request would be if we can find partner funding. To me, this is a great avenue where we have so many generous partners, and this is a lane where I think it serves the community in a lot of ways. So I don't know if that conversation has been discussed, explored. I know we do really, we rely on our philanthropic partners for a variety of things. To me, this fits well in that. Is that something that's been discussed, or can you share a little bit more on that?
I don't have any updates as terms of any commitments to that, but it is something that we have talked about, reaching out to some of our partners to see if there is interest in that. I know donors typically have initiatives that they are passionate about and funding. Someone may be out there that takes this on as a passion project or is really prioritizing this for us, and we will look at that as an option. But it may not pan out, but I think it is definitely something that we're going to continue having conversations with our partners.
Well, I appreciate the level one holding on to that. I really do. I think it's so important. The part that Mr. Edwards brought up as far as approaching it as a potential donation, that's more of a CPA finance question. Is that something that we could offer, and then it's a tax deduction, even though it's not that substantial, but is that something that's able to be offered, or we can consider that as far as a compliance standpoint at another time? I'll just put it out there. But I think that, any ways that that's being able to be offered in addition to, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Finally, with the rental facilities, I'm fine with that. I think we provide, all of us can attest to any different district we go to. Our facilities are in extraordinary shape, many of them. So I'm happy to see this. I believe we should be at least at market rate. My question is, when we rent a facility as it stands now, it's only available for rent when the school is closed, or is it during operational hours? Do we have any kind of, I'm seeing all the, okay,
Go ahead.
It varies.
No, typically, we do not open the rental window until after bell time.
After bell time?
Correct, because now we're inviting people on campus that may or may not be badged and things of that nature. So no, there are windows for rental, and it's not during school-based times.
So that's what I assumed, and I completely recognize the security component to it, so I'm not diminishing that. And anytime it were to be adjusted, you have to do an ROI, like, are we paying more for security costs, et cetera? But is that something we have looked at when we have different areas on each campus is different? And I don't know if this is a district decision or if it really falls more, if that autonomy is at the school-based level, Mr. Connor, but there are certainly opportunities beyond that beyond just the general VPAC kind of, that we could be looking at. I just don't know what that concept, the security component. Can you elaborate, or is that even?
No, that's the consideration, really, right? We want to protect the instructional time as best we can. We don't want to, as much as I love this conversation, I also understand that we're not a for-profit business.
Thank you, and I was going to say we're not either.
So, but we also love the ideas of how we can offset some of the expenses that are pressuring us, right? So, I love the conversation, but I also want to make sure that the main thing remains the main thing, and that we're not in the business of trying to profit. We're educating students, but there's a lot of contingencies that come along if you're doing it during the school day
Right.
that I'm not comfortable necessarily opening that floodgate.
Understood.
I understand there may be some one-off situations where maybe it's a special occasion, a special event. We can talk about that with that organization, but that is not going to be a common practice.
Okay, I appreciate that because I do frequently say staying within our bailiwick and not beyond, so we're not in all these variety of different areas of specialty beyond education. So I just wasn't sure what that current practice is. Mr. Edwards, you're recognized.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that when we finish this conversation, because I think it's our job as fiscal agents to give specific direction to the superintendent. I feel like we're still kind of chewing it around, and we need to give direction to the superintendent.
Thank you. I think I started with the direction that we will be giving the superintendent. I can go down the lane. I mean, I don't know if you have the correct direction that you need. I don't know that I have any objections.
I'll just reiterate. I will bring forth a recommendation, and since we're in this part of the summer, we have a board meeting next week. The meal price recommendation will come forth. If there is consensus on that, we'll bring it forward for board approval, as well as the rental fees and the fingerprinting. So those will be 3 additional items that will be added to this next agenda.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments on that? All right, seeing none, we move on to PM3 results. Mr. Connor.
All right, now for some fun. So I know we are planning an executive session at 2:45. So we have a lot of slides to blow through here, but I want to give it as much attention and time and dedication because a lot of great news regarding the progress monitoring 3 data, the state accountability, school grades. So while we are limited a little bit on time and the amount of information and celebrations that we want to share, I'll try to still give it its due here and not blow through it too fast. But before we get into the actual data and the results, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Rachel O'Day to talk about how we align our supports and all of the work that is done behind the scene to get to where we are with the state assessment results.
Yes, thank you, Superintendent Connor. So Mr. Connor will be sharing data that is really a direct result of the aligned collective effort of multiple parts of our organization. And we affectionately like to call this now our golden thread, which you can see outlined on our screen. And it's strategically positioning district staff, school-based leaders, and teachers to cultivate and implement the data-driven systems, processes, and procedures that have been developed. And that ultimately results in strategic data-driven decision-making, the development of high-quality customized support plans for each school, and the aligned deployment of resources and support staff to lift, activate, and advance those plans that we create for each school each year. On this slide, you've heard me speak about this in depth for 3 years, so I'm not going to do that, but I'm just going to reference it because it is the anchor of that golden thread and that collective effort that we seek as an organization. And it is our anchor, ensuring that school-based leaders, teachers, and district staff are focused on the right things at the right time. And there's just 3 big buckets that we really lean into. The instructional implementation, which is ensuring that instruction is standards aligned and also aligned to best practices. We ensure that we have data-driven processes, procedures, resources, and protocols so that everyone's activated around the most relevant information as it pertains to student needs. And then deep feedback cycles that we work collaboratively as a district staff and school-based team to observe and analyze the plans, the instruction, the processes, and how that's taking root in our school and how we can continue to grow and advance and become even stronger at what we're trying to do. That is really activated by our impact reviews that we start off each year. And that's a collaborative force between district staff and school-based teams, looking at not only student achievement data, but also the observation data that we analyze while we're in classrooms together. And that creates those customized support plans and action plans that schools cycle through all year long. And then through the leadership of Ms. Minnelli and Dr. Green, the deployment and the support and the strategy that comes from the district team, where they are, with who and when, and what they're working on is vastly different at each school based on the results of that impact review and student outcomes. That's really what roots the work that we've done over the past 3 years. And when we're looking into this upcoming year, the bottom right corner of the screen talks about this year, the multiplier effect. And what we're saying when that is mentioned is that we are doing what's worked while ensuring what the systems that got us there, making sure that we continue to do that and we continue to deepen, but also focusing on collective efficacy, which means that we all believe that the work that we do can and will have a positive impact on student achievement. That actually has one of the highest effect sizes based on John Hattie's research. And it can overtake any of those external factors such as socioeconomic status and trauma if we have that collective efficacy as an organization, and that is the culture that we live and breathe in this district. Now, we have that going, but we really want that to be hardwired, institutionalized, and sustainable. So we have our system, and we want to make sure that culture around the system feeds that sustainability and continues to deepen and advance those practices within our system. Before I move on, I'm going to be handing the rest of this part off to Dr. Green and Ms. Minnelli, and their focus is really not going to be speaking about those 3 prongs that I discussed with the system and the golden thread, but really deepening on the processes and procedures that are data-driven in our schools that allow us to attack the gap with our lowest quartile and at-risk students. What are the similarities? What are the differences? And how are they sifting down to those needs to create the kind of outcomes that we're seeing with our lowest quartile and our learning gains? Because that has been a conversation that's come up multiple times in work sessions. And we already talked about doing a deeper dive on the behavior and the attendance data and how that impacts or doesn't impact student achievement, but they're going to talk more about those data systems and processes for the lowest quartile and at-risk students. And Dr. Green will also talk about behavior and attendance and how we triangulate that in to address the whole child within our focus framework, that leg 2, those data-driven structures and procedures. And again, a future presentation will go really deep on the analysis of that data and where do we have outliers and how is it impacting or not, and what do we have to do to get in front of that and continue to achieve in that area. Ms. Minnelli.
Thanks, Ms. O'Day. Good afternoon, board members. So as Ms. O'Day just alluded to, the center of the work that we're going to focus on today and share with you is really around our data processes and the response that our schools are taking, because that systems-driven leadership is so critical when using data-driven protocols. And Dr. Green and I are going to talk about what's happening within our schools across K-12, because that golden thread is very important. There's certain nuances that have to happen at the elementary level and the secondary level, of course, but we hope for you to see that consistency across our campus. So our schools are not just waiting for that PM1 and PM2 results to come out to really analyze student performance. We're very strategically and specifically starting with the prior year's PM3 results to look at every single student and set goals for those students for those learning gains. And then what we do is we have our schools to look at the PM1 and PM2 results to make projections on how close or how far they are to reaching those individualized goals. But really where the magic happens is sort of the layer beneath that, where we're looking at those common curriculum assessments that are really assessing where our students are in regards to the instruction that's delivered and how close they are to mastering standards. And so we've sort of coined that our layer 2. We're going below that layer 1 of data that we see this global picture from our FAST results and really aligning our systems to how close are our students to mastering what was taught, and then what do we need to respond? What does our response look like from how close or how far away they are? Are we intervening because we've got some major learning gaps that are emerging? Are we just reteaching because maybe they just simply missed something? Or are we advancing and accelerating because they're there and we need to push them beyond? And so really that marriage between layer 1 and layer 2 is, like I said, that's sort of the magic to our recipe, and we feel that that is what has yielded such positive results in our PM3 scores this year. And so at our district level, we're really aligning those supports to make sure that system is coming to life. So principals are leading regular data conversations with teachers. Our district coaching and school visits are really aligned to making sure that when we're walking classrooms, we've got a lens on students, and so that way that data that we're analyzing behind the scenes, we're watching what that's looking like in practice in the classroom and then responding and supporting our teachers accordingly. Our program specialists and our school support staff are working alongside our teachers to make sure that Tier 1 instruction is strong, small group plans are designed, and that we are using those achievement level descriptors to make sure that every student is getting what they need to meet those goals that we set based on their PM3 results from the year prior. So really every level of support from the top down and the bottom up is aligned to those processes, and that's happening across our campuses K-12. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Green to speak specifically on some of those systems in secondary.
Thank you. So right now, schools are planning for their student groups. So they're planning for their lower quartile groups of students based on their end of year data. And they're planning for things like intensive scheduling, push-in supports, resources, and that is driving their master schedule. And so as we move into the school year, whether it's elementary or secondary, schools have already designed what that's going to look like across the year as we start to receive more data. And then those supports begin to get adjusted as students, we get more assessment data, we get more feedback from teachers. And so right now, that's what they're currently planning. We put a strong emphasis with our lower quartile students around interventions that we provide, whether it's in an intensive reading class or a double block math class, or it's in a WIN block, to make sure that we're aligning the right resources to the needs of the students to address any skill deficits that may exist. And through that, we're able to attack any root cause analysis that we see based on research, using research-based practices that we know have high yield effects. And then as we get into the second semester, that's when we start to plan for our press to push. And last year, that was a great initiative. It's been one for 3 years, the push planning, but pushing in the second semester to really get down to the student level. We started with press planning, which is looking at outliers. So we're looking at common courses, like demographics as student achievement, to see where are we progressing and where are we seeing that students aren't meeting the standard, and then coming in and providing support to those classrooms. And then towards the final stretch, that's what we're considering like our sprint to the finish, that's when we're looking at our individual student data against all of our previous assessments to see what standards do they need remediation on or reteaching, who's going to provide it, how frequently, and then what will we use to assess their progress, and then pivot where we need to.
So speaking of the lowest quartile, I know that has been a topic throughout most of the morning and into the afternoon. I think it's important that we spend some time really delineating between our lowest quartile students and our at-risk students, because they're not always synonymous, but sometimes we talk about them as they are, right? So our lowest quartile really is the students performing at the bottom 25% academically within a school, but then we also have a lowest quartile within our district. And so every school, depending on the student population, the demographics, and their overall student performance, is going to have a lowest quartile bucket of students, but those students may not necessarily be feeding our district's lowest quartile. And with that in mind, every student falling within the lowest quartile on a specific campus may not necessarily be an identified at-risk student. So when we think about our students who are at risk, we utilize our early warning system indicators driven by statute, and we have that list here of all of those indicators. That's attendance concern, behavior concerns, some of the things that we spoke about earlier this morning. And so because we know that those groups are not necessarily the same, they are a fluid group, especially falling within the lowest quartile year to year, we really make sure to take a wider look. We start with our academic concerns, we start with our academic data, but then we pull in these other factors, and Dr. Green's going to talk to you about some of those data sets that we utilize when thinking about our at-risk students. So once we've identified who those students are, within which cell they're falling within the lowest quartile, are at risk, and in some cases they're falling within both, then we are intervening quickly and responding accordingly.
So the systems and structures that we've developed really is the golden thread in our work K-12. And we know that we don't review academic data in a silo. So when we're trying to address what is the contributing factor to academic decline, we have to look at all of the data globally to make sure that we are diagnosing the right space, providing the right resources so that students have what they need. So what you'll see here is the data that we review really comes down to discipline, attendance, and academics. And using that information, we're then able to drive our systems to identifying which students might be suffering from attendance, might be suffering from discipline, and then looking at how are they progressing academically to make sure that we're giving those students the right attention. We use our SWIST and CARE processes for that, which we talked about earlier, and we'll go in more depth later into that data. And then Project 10, which is a high school initiative, which focuses predominantly on the graduating cohort of seniors. However, we have expanded that into all of the cohorts to see how they are progressing against the three main areas they need for graduation, which is credits, GPA, and tests. And so in those meetings, we triangulate the support with everyone in the room, from counselors, administrators, social workers, sometimes teachers are involved in those conversations, and we start looking kid by kid based on those early warning indicators. And we start talking about if they're missing credits, well then what's their attendance look like? And is there a correlation there? So now let's go find out, why are they not coming to school? And what resources can we align to the issue that we might be seeing to get them back in class? PBIS is another initiative that is the foundation of the culture and climate work in our schools. We want all of our campuses to be a place where students and staff want to be. And so our schools are taking intentional steps with targeting positive initiatives for staff and students to make sure that they feel supported every day. And then mentoring programs has such a strong ROI in our district and I mean everywhere. We know that the most successful mentorship programs are the ones that are natural, where kids feel like the person who's giving me advice and mentoring me is someone I really like. And so we see that a lot in our schools, but then we also have our outside agencies that we partner with who are able to come in and mentor our kids. And that has been very successful in our schools, just every student having a person that they can go to no matter what it is that they're working through to be successful. So all of those pieces come together, but really the main thing is, as we're building these systems for academic success, we are always including those at-risk factors when we're seeing declines to make sure that we're not missing something and that every student is being met where they're at and then advanced.
So, and to sum that up, the most important delineation we're trying to make is that your lowest quartile, there is a strategic plan to address underperforming academics that may turn into also addressing at-risk factors. But we also have at-risk students that are high performing that have other issues that we also have to address. So learning gains encompasses it all: lowest quartile performance and performance of our high performers. So when Mr. Connor shares that, looking at our lowest quartile data and our gains is really attributed to those data systems and processes that you heard Ms. Minnelli and Dr. Green share a little bit of insight on. Mr. Connor.
All right, so you heard a little bit about the secret sauce. Now we're going to talk about the results and how that all came out in the wash. So very proud to say, as we look as in comparison to last year in 2025, that the 12 cells that are a part of our state accountability system, we saw a total increase, an aggregate of 32.9 increase in 1 year. So that was tremendous, and that's on top of the gains that have been made over the last 3 years. And so that has obviously put us as an A school district, and that is the 23rd year since the inception of the grades. And so we're real proud of the growth that we're seeing. Obviously, in third grade, we are continuing to make progress. When I got here, we were in the 60s. We are now approaching 73. And then we're going to talk a little bit about breaking out our district managed schools, which we have oversight, and the things that was just shared are happening with Fidelity. And then, of course, to our charter partners who are not necessarily under our supervision in terms of oversight with curriculum and instruction. Some do partner with us, but for the most part, they're independent operators. So when you look at all of our schools, we had a total of 868 points. That's inclusive of our charters. But then I want to look at the breakout. So our district managed schools, if you just pulled that out, we would have made 880 points, which would have actually moved our state ranking from 7th to 5th. And then charter schools, if you treated it as its own district, which I know they're all independent of each other, but if you just looked at it in comparison to our district managed schools, they would have been 23rd in comparison. So the rankings there tell a little bit of a picture. So really proud day that when you look at the overall comparison between the number of A and B schools, we have continued year after year to eliminate schools below B to a point where now all 40 of our schools, district managed, are either an A or a B, with 35 of them being A's. So that's tremendous work in accordance with the work that is being done and has been shared. The schools that continue to fall below that are in our charter schools. So we do have 2 C's and 1 F currently that we'll be reaching out to see if they need any support from our end. As you know, the graduation rates came out back January, and we're continuing to see tremendous progress year over year. We were in the 80s 3 years ago. We are now approaching 94, 95%, and I believe we're going to continue to see growth even into next year. That is a little bit lag because we continue to push through the summer, and we get as many kids graduated all the way through this month in July, and then there's a bit of a cleanup process with the state before those are released in January. Overall, looking at our ELA reading proficiency, comparison to last year, and looking also at PM1, 2, and 3 and seeing that growth, you can see in the very last column compared to last year the growth in each of those areas. So we're seeing continued trajectory upwards in each of those grades, even though we had a little bit of a slip in 4th grade. We do know there are some challenges with even some of those COVID students that started. We're still pushing through, but we're making progress, and we're definitely pinpointing supports for those students and those grade levels. Math seeing tremendous growth as well year over year, so very proud of seeing what's happening there. And then acceleration, again, is lag for the most part at our high school components. Middle school, we're seeing some tremendous growth, now reaching 81%, and we've gone from 73 to 79 in high school. And that is those students who are participating in college level coursework, or if they're in middle school, they're participating in high school level coursework and they're being successful. But that 3-year change is very significant, and we're very proud of that. So total overall, if you just look over the total points that have just happened over the last 4-year period, the third year says 300. That's because we didn't have the gain calculation there. But you can see over 4-year, 85 points is pretty tremendous. We can't forget, it all starts in kindergarten, 1st and 2nd. So we are monitoring that with the state. We do have the STAR literacy component as well as STAR math, and we're looking to ensure that those students are making progress. We did see a dip compared to last year. We do know that every cohort is different. In our 2nd grade, we are, I am happy to say that we're focusing on that with professional development with our literacy instruction through the Strauss grant. So I do feel like there is definitely a focus on making sure that those teachers have the right supports, and we'll shore that up as those students move into the 3rd grade. But you can see in math some tremendous growth over the last 2 years. So, time to celebrate some highlights of our actual schools. So we call these our sustainers, those schools that maintained their grades. So you see all the schools listed here kept their A or their B grade. And then our climbers, those students who are schools that moved from one grade level up to the next. So Wilkinson and Gosio moving out of the C range into the B range. And then, of course, the schools here, notably Emma E. Booker making its first A in history. So that's tremendous. In terms of total point growth, I could have put about 15 slides on here about that, but I just stopped at 74 points. But Gosio, really proud to say, when you look at the list of schools just here in the top 7, 5 of these are brand new principals within the first 2 years. So they're really coming in gung-ho, working hard, getting the focus in on instruction, and you can see 124 points with Gosio this year, and as well as Brentwood at 116. But every one of these schools, and there are more, unfortunately, I got to move through. But we have celebrated with each of these schools. Third grade proficiency, as we know, is a very important indicator for student success throughout their K-12 area. But look at these schools who saw just in that third grade ELA proficiency 18, 15, 14, 13. These are Title I schools, so whoever says Title I can't do it, this is the proof that when you put your resources in there. But of course, we have some high flyer schools. We know that Sky Ranch just opened up, and we knew we were kind of nervous about what would that do to Ashton, what would that do to Lakeview. Well, look, they're all in the top high proficiency in third grade. So there wasn't as a shock as we would anticipate with the opening of a school and what impact that would have had. So great work with those schools maintaining very high third grade proficiency. In terms of math learning gains, you can see, again, a lot of our Title I schools right there with the highest percentage in learning growth over the course of this year, as well as ELA. And you can see some of these schools are being repeated over and over again. It's because that culture, that leadership, those teachers, those communities have gotten into the groove of knowing how to really support students and maximizing as much learning as possible. Because we only have 180 days of instruction, right? And you got to take advantage of every single one of those. And this shows that schools are taking that very seriously. We've talked a lot about the lower quartile. And again, when you look at the schools here, no surprise, you see a lot of our Title I schools where students can live in, bulk of students are living under proficiency, not necessarily underperforming, but you can see what these schools are producing. Lots of growth, bottom quartile growth, double digits. These are unheard of in many cases. I've seen schools that is their quartile proficient gains. This is just the growth on top of where they're at. When you look at grade proficiency, we do rank very high in the state when it comes to fifth grade science proficiency. And you can see, again, Brentwood just about on every single slide, Bayhaven, Gosio, and of course our high flyers with Ashton, Southside, Lakeview, and Bayhaven at very, very high percentages. Now we're going to move into secondary and celebrate what's going on there. So all of our middle schools are now A middle schools. So congratulations to the work that's happening there. And Booker Middle, for the first time ever, is an A school. But tremendous work to say that all of those schools have made it to the highest grade. Our maintainers in secondary are here on the screen. As you can see, they either maintained their A or their B. I will say it's going to become harder next year. There are now triggers where they're going to be elevating that criteria, but we are very confident that we're going to maintain 100% A and B as we go into a harder year in relation to school grade calculations. And looking at academic growth, look at the overall growth at McIntosh, at Booker, and at Brookside, double digits. McIntosh was 70-point growth over last year. Northport, Riverview, Venice, double-digit gains, extremely well. As well as ELA proficiency, you can see McIntosh again, Booker, Woodland, and as high schools at Sarasota, Northport, Booker, and Venice High. And when you see this type of growth at the high school, that's really demonstrating, because by the time students reach that level, it's harder to move year after year. In math proficiency, you can see Booker, McIntosh, and Brookside again with significant growth, as well as Sarasota High and Northport. And then learning gains. big jumps for a lot of our schools. And again, most of these are in the Title I bucket. For our high schools, you can see learning gains, same thing, same schools. As well as social studies, big growth, McIntosh again, Brookside, Heron Creek, Venice Middle, and Riverview, Booker, and Suncoast Polytech with tremendous growth. In science, McIntosh takes the #1 spot again, Booker Middle, Heron Creek, and Sarah Middle, and you can see there with high school, tremendous work and focus, as we talked about earlier, with the systems that are in place. We really did a great job in focusing on middle school acceleration this year. I think that was a big proponent of moving a lot of those into that area. There were points left on the table, I felt, and the team did a great job in strategizing, making sure that every student was taking an opportunity to earn those high school components the best they can, and you can see it paid off for many of our schools. We're going to continue down this area. I still think in high school there's a lot of opportunity where we can push to get more students prepared before they graduate. We talked about graduation rates. We know that that's a very important factor for students as they move on to post-secondary opportunities, and we're continuing to see some tremendous growth. I mean, we're well up in the high 90s in many of our schools. These are our district-managed schools, so the anticipation is we want every school every student to graduate on time within that 4-year cohort the best we can. So we're taking a lot of opportunities to track those students, provide the supports, and get them on their way. This is hot off the press and probably, to me, one of the most significant parts of this data presentation. Remember, we talked about the federal categories over the last 3 years that schools are basically targeted for support based on how they're underperforming, and they get levels of support. So a comprehensive support school, a CSI school, gets the most intensive support, and that's where you have one or more of the student groups underperforming, meaning 40% or less of those students are not meeting adequate growth. So whether it's students with disabilities, which we had a multitude of schools that were not meeting, or it may have been students of a specific demographic, free and reduced lunch, all of those are a part of that. When we started in 2022, we had 35 schools out of all of our district managed and charters. We are down to 10. And when you only look at the district managed schools, we're down to 5. So we've gone from 25 schools that had a designation of either CSI, TSI, or ATSI, which are just basically different tiers and level of support. And we've gone from 25 to 5. And really 2 of those are non-traditional schools like Triad and Oak Park. There's really only 3 of our traditional settings. And so we've really reduced the number of underperforming subgroups where we had a multitude of students with disabilities underperforming in each of these schools, and we've eliminated almost all of them. We're continuing to push till we have 0, but tremendous progress that has been made, and is evidence that what we're doing is working for each and every student. So I'm going to stop there. I know that was fast, but I did want to leave at least some time for discussion, and I'll hand it back over to the board.
Well, thank you. This is very exciting. I know that all of us, when we got that, were just not surprised, but just so excited. And it's the data it never gets old to look at. Members of the board, are there any comments? Mrs. Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lots of years, multiple decades in the district, and you, Superintendent Connor, and Mrs. O'Day and your team, and the principals and the teachers getting on board, and partners in community, you've put together every best practice of the, 10, 11 superintendents that I've worked with over the years, and you have systemized those, hardwired them, and covered every variable with accountability and communication in intervals of meeting with folks that are front and center on the calendar. I mean, you've covered absolutely everything, and the results have occurred. And I'm astonished and I'm incredibly honored to be here and see this happen. It's phenomenal and most phenomenal for our students. Thank you. Heartfelt, thank you.
Mrs. Marinelli.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think I could say it any better than Miss Rose. I expected a little bit more because I know with this how excited and dedicated she is to the student achievement. I just thank you. I think I'm very honored when the direction of the board was student achievement and get the focus back to where it needed to be and what you've done in 3 years. And I think also having many, many years in education and working with all different students and families, whether you are in poverty or you can be the richest or average, Title I, every parent wants their child to succeed. And when that mission is student achievement and I want my child to succeed, you've proved what can be done in 3 years. When the focus gets taken off, you see what happens. When the focus is driven and everybody buys into it, from district staff to the principals, and the principals set the tone at their school, and the teachers, the magic happens in the classroom. You're seeing this. Brentwood is my district as far as where my home is. And to see what Brentwood has done and the commitment that the teachers and the administrators there have, it's phenomenal. But for Emma E. Booker, for the first time, it just goes to show you every child has that chance to succeed when the focus is on student achievement. So thank you to everybody in the whole system, our community, parents, and I'm just very honored to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. I agree. I think that, you've so often, and these are on the aggregate, right? Where we're standing, there are, there's a sense sometimes that external variables limit a child's opportunity or a potential. And there's no doubt that different external variables play a role, but the commitment and unapologetic focus on these students so that they can see that they can achieve, and the support that was given to our educators so that they could see that they are able to deliver those kind of outcomes for every child is just extraordinary. I mean, it really is extraordinary. And I know that you guys had a commitment, you had a task that was asked of you of this board, and you guys hit the ground running, and we're constantly evaluating it and trying to find what, the right leaders for various positions to really take us there. And it's the proof is here. And I know that when you hit that level, as Mr. Connor said, it makes it hard, like the next year, keep pushing it. But the strides that have been made are substantial, and that sustainability is something that we constantly talk about up here from the financial standpoint. But the heart is so clearly focused on our students and that outcome, and I just couldn't be more excited. Mrs. Barker.
Thank you. Well, I mean, mic drop. What could I possibly add? Thank you so much, all. I, as someone who really enjoys digging into the data, this is, the most wonderful time of the year when it all comes out. I really get a kick out of it. And I think it's really interesting that across the country we're seeing, we saw a learning recession during COVID, and now we're beginning to see a learning recovery. We're also in the third year of the FAST testing, and I think you all have taken that and run with it and really turned us into a district to watch. And that's what I am just thrilled to be a part of. So thank you for driving that change for us. One of the things that I was looking at recently in my own analysis is schools that sort of outperformed what you'd expect of them, not just in Sarasota, but across the state, based on the level of economic disadvantage. And there are several schools in middle schools particularly that I'm interested in that have really kind of are in that top 5% above your line of prediction. And so I'd be interested in chatting with you all more to see if there's ways that we can, lessons to be learned, particularly as we continue to push forward with our middle school and making them more and more attractive to our parents. But just an enormous amount of gratitude on my end. Thank you for all that you've done.
Thank you, Mrs. Marinelli.
I forgot to mention this. This is basically to Superintendent Connor. On our district managed schools, you can see the progress, but I do have a concern on one of our charter schools that scored an F. And historically, this school has had difficulty, and I know we have very little control, but I think it needs to be addressed, and I think it needs to be addressed with Department of Ed and everybody else, because I worry about those students. And if they do come back to our schools, they're going to need a lot of support. But this is unacceptable, because this charter school's been in operation a long time, and their history of low performance speaks for itself. And to get an F and all the other schools have improved, I think we most definitely have to address it, and because I worry about those students. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
Well, I think the data and everything that's been said is just outstanding, and that the systems and the procedures and your deep dive into the lowest quartile, thank you. I really do appreciate that. We're here, we're being heard, and the presentation zeroed right in on that. So I really appreciate that. I am not going to lower the bar because next year looks harder or seems harder. The same thing that we talk about in Title I schools, we don't lower the expectations, we maintain or improve. So I'm gonna hold that standard. But at the same time, I also think that because of this, because of the extraordinary advancement that these systems, and it's not just the systems, it's the people. Your team, Mr. Connor, all of you sitting there, the care, it's not a slogan, every child, every day. It comes from the heart. And I'd like to translate that into how do we make sure that our families know about it and know comparison, apple to apple, we are the best game in town. We've got to get these folks back. And I see it's coming, but we do. We want you back. We're doing a great job. We're knocking it out of the park. And you should be here.
Thank you. Mrs. Rose?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Specifically, does this board have any authority, Superintendent Connor, over the charter school and the trend of low performance in the current F?
So statutorily, we can begin the closure process. We can initiate that after 2 consecutive Fs. We have sent a letter to this particular school urging some immediate action. So we're working very closely on what that will be. But we are concerned from a financial standpoint in their status as well as their performance academically. And so the last thing you want to talk about is a school closure, but again, to Ms. Marinelli's point, it is about the students, and we want to make sure that they're getting all the supports necessary. And I do have grave concerns about the continuation under these current conditions with this school.
Well, essentially, they're all our children. They're in this community regardless of the school that they're in. And I'm not speaking for my colleagues, but I tend to think we would all like an update on our collective authority with essentially protecting those students in having the same option that the rest of the schools offer, which is learning.
Thank you. No, I concur, and I know that having served on this board for a couple of terms, this particular school has come up a number of times, and broadly, there's a multitude of concerns. Certainly, we want to ensure that every child has an opportunity to be academically successful. There was also, from a planning standpoint, as closure had certainly been on the table prior years before. From a planning standpoint, I believe their enrollment was higher at that point. I want to say they were in excess of 150, maybe 100 at that time, not now. I believe that we're under 100. Is that correct?
Yeah, we're about
'Cause
70.
70? Okay, so, and the reason I say that is there's a whole planning aspect from likely remediation and supports that are going to be required for these students. As was noted in a prior workshop, a portion of the workshop was about all the planning that's taking place right now when it comes to scheduling and staffing and making sure we have the supports aligned to what is going to be, coming on board. And so I would echo the concern that my fellow colleagues have shared, and perhaps you can provide us with some kind of briefing on what our authorities are, what conversations have taken place. Is there an opportunity to provide accurate and current information to families that are currently attending that school? Because I don't know, are they necessarily aware? I'm just being very candid. I want to make sure that we're communicating properly to them, and in an effort to ensure that there is that they're very clear on the opportunities that are available to their children. I think that's I would like to see what that looks like, and if that's something you can provide to us in a very near future, I would appreciate it. Not to rain on the positive parade, because this is really great work, and again, you guys have defied so many, I think, complacent statements that you hear out in the ether in general. And I appreciate everything that you guys have done. And you guys all have so much to be proud of. The students of this district have so much to be proud of, the staff. And I know it's a challenging year financially and changes and all that. And as we always say, that is the one consistent thing in education is change. But this is a change for the positive, and I just thank you so very much for all of the work and for the commitment and the many late hours. So thank you to all of you. If there are no additional comments on that, I know we have a 2:45 executive session. And Mr. Connor, are we meeting in here?
Yes,
Or
we'll meet in the next room.
AB?
B, yeah. Is it A? I'm not sure what.
Over there. Okay. So then I'll open up. I want to give members an opportunity to take a quick break before 2:45, but I will open up to board member comments. That concluded the items on the agenda. Any comments or questions from the board? Wow. All right. Well, I am not going to break that. I will let you guys 30 minutes. And we will stand adjourned. The tentative budget meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July 21st at 10 a.m. with the school board meeting following at 10:30 a.m. The public hearing to adopt the tentative budget is scheduled for Tuesday, July 28th at 5:01 p.m. Still see no comments up here, so if that stands, we are adjourned, and we'll reconvene for the executive session at 2:45 in AB for collective bargaining. See you guys at 2:45.